A gunshot, a broken wheel. A woman with a revolver pointed at a stranger's heart. "I don't need your help," she said, even as darkness fell across the Montana territory and danger circled closer. But the cowboy saw something in her fierce independence that changed everything. This is the story of Evelyn Hart and Cole Barrington, a love born from dust, defiance, and destiny. Stay with me until the very end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The wheel cracked with a sound like a bone breaking. Evelyn Hart felt the stagecoach lurch violently to the right, heard the driver's shout of alarm, and braced herself against the wooden seat as the entire vehicle tilted at a sickening angle. Her carpetbag slid across the floor. The book she'd been reading. Great Expectations, its pages worn soft from countless readings, flew from her hands and disappeared into the shadowed corner of the coach. Then stillness. The terrible dust-choked stillness of the Montana Territory in late summer 1872. "Ma'am, you all right in there?" The driver's weathered face appeared at the window, creased with concern and streaked with trail dust. Evelyn pushed herself upright, ignoring the sharp protest from her shoulder where she'd collided with the coach wall. "I'm fine, Mr. Henderson. What happened?" "Front wheels busted clean through. Axles cracked too." He spat into the dirt, his expression grim. "We ain't going nowhere without repairs, and I don't have the tools for this kind of fix. Not out here." She climbed out carefully, her traveling dress immediately collecting dust from the dry Montana air. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, rolling grassland painted gold by the afternoon sun, punctuated by distant mountains that looked like broken teeth against the cloudless sky. Beautiful, certainly, but also vast, empty, and suddenly very hostile. "How far to Silver Ridge?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the flutter of panic trying to take root in her chest. 20 miles, give or take." Henderson knelt beside the broken wheel, running his hands over the splintered wood. "And it'll be dark in 3, maybe 4 hours." Evelyn had read enough about the frontier to know what darkness meant out here. Bandits, wild animals, accidents that could kill you slowly while the stars watched with cold indifference. She'd left Boston 3 weeks ago with a teaching contract determination and exactly $67 in carefully saved money. She had not left civilization to die on a nameless road before even reaching her destination. "Then we fix it," she said firmly. Henderson looked up at her with something between pity and admiration. "Ma'am, I appreciate the spirit, but this ain't a job for a woman." Evelyn arched one dark eyebrow. "Mr. Henderson, I assure you I'm quite capable of—" The gunshot split the air like a thunderclap. Evelyn's hat went instinctively to her reticule, where she kept the small revolver her father had insisted she carry. Henderson was on his feet immediately, his hand on his own weapon, his eyes scanning the grassland. "Probably just a hunter," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. A second shot, closer this time. Then from the rolling swell of land to the east, a rider appeared. He was silhouetted against the lowering sun, which made him look less like a man and more like a legend, broad-shouldered, sitting tall in the saddle, his horse moving with the easy grace of an animal that knew its rider well. As he drew closer, details emerged: dark hair beneath a worn hat, a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard, eyes that seemed to take in everything with one sweeping glance, and a rifle held casually across his saddle. Evelyn pulled the revolver from her reticule and aimed it directly at the approaching rider. "That's far enough, she called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The rider reined in his horse about 20 feet away, and to her surprise he smiled. It was a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and transformed his face from merely handsome to something dangerously attractive. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect that seemed almost archaic. "I saw you were having trouble. Thought I'd ride over and offer assistance." "We don't need assistance," Evelyn replied, keeping the revolver steady. "Particularly not from someone who announces their arrival with gunfire." "I was shooting at a rattlesnake," he said mildly, nodding toward the grass behind him. "Big one coiled up near some rocks where your horses might have wandered. Didn't want anyone getting bit." Henderson squinted in the direction the stranger indicated. "That true?" "I don't make a habit of lying," the man said, and something in his tone suggested he was telling the truth. "Name's Cole Barrington. I own the Double B Ranch about 5 miles north of here. He looked at Evelyn, his gaze steady and unintimidating despite the gun still pointed at his chest. You can keep that revolver aimed at me if it makes you feel safer, miss, but I promise you I mean no harm, just trying to help. Barrington, Henderson's posture relaxed slightly. I've heard of your spread. Good reputation. I appreciate that. Cole dismounted with fluid ease, moving slowly and deliberately, as if he understood he was being watched carefully. But your friend there doesn't seem inclined to take my word for it. I am not his friend, Evelyn said crisply. I am his passenger, and I don't take anyone's word for anything without evidence to support it. Cole's smile widened. Boston. Excuse me. Your accent, Boston or somewhere close to it. He took a few careful steps closer, his hands visible and empty. What brings a Boston woman to Montana territory with a broken stagecoach and a suspicious nature? My nature is not suspicious, it's cautious. There's a difference. But Evelyn lowered the revolver slightly, though she didn't put it away. And my business is my own. Fair enough. He turned his attention to Henderson and the broken wheel. That's a bad break. You won't fix that out here, not properly. Best I can do is offer you both a place to stay for the night at my ranch. Tomorrow I can bring you back with proper tools and a spare wheel. Should have you on your way by noon. Henderson looked relieved. That's mighty generous, Mr. Barrington. It's common decency, Cole replied. He looked back at Evelyn. What do you say, Miss Hart? Evelyn Hart. She hesitated, weighing her options. The sun was indeed getting lower, painting the clouds on the horizon in shades of amber and rose. The temperature would drop fast once darkness fell, and despite her determination to be self-sufficient, she understood the difference between independence and foolishness. How do I know you're who you claim to be? You don't, Cole said honestly. But consider this, if I meant you harm, I'd have brought more men, and I wouldn't have bothered with introductions. He paused, then added with surprising gentleness, Look, Miss Hart, I understand your caution. A woman alone out here has every right to be careful. But night's coming fast, and this isn't safe country after dark. I'm offering shelter food and no strings attached. You'll have your own room with a lock on the door. My word on that. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. His eyes were gray. She noticed the color of wood smoke or winter clouds. They met hers directly without evasion or calculation. She'd been trained by her father, a judge, to read people, to look for the tells that indicated dishonesty or ill intent. This man showed none of them. Very well, she said finally, slipping the revolver back into her reticule. But Mr. Henderson comes with us. Wouldn't have it any other way, Cole agreed. Let me help you gather your things. The ride to the Double B Ranch took 40 minutes, with Evelyn seated behind Cole on his horse, a position that required her to hold on to him for balance, which she did with stiff, reluctant dignity, while Henderson followed on one of the stagecoach horses. The sun had nearly set by the time they crested a rise, and she saw the ranch spread out before them. It was not what she expected. Based on her limited knowledge of Western ranches, Evelyn had imagined something rough and provisional, a few ramshackle buildings perhaps surrounded by dust and disorder. Instead, the Double B was surprisingly well established. The main house was a 2-story structure of timber and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth and food. Behind it stood a large barn, several smaller outbuildings and corrals where horses moved like shadows in the gathering dusk. It's bigger than I expected, she said before she could stop herself. She felt rather than saw Cole's smile. We've been here 15 years. My father started it, and I've been building on what he created. It's home. As they approached, a weathered man with gray hair emerged from the barn, his face breaking into a grin when he saw Cole. Boss, we weren't expecting you back till... He stopped when he noticed Evelyn and Henderson. Well, seems you brought company. Sam, this is Miss Hart and Mr. Henderson. Stagecoach broke down on the Silver Ridge Road. They'll be staying the night. Cole dismounted and helped Evelyn down, his hands firm and respectful on her waist. Can you see to Mr. Henderson? Get him settled in the bunkhouse. Make sure he gets dinner. Course, Sam said, his eyes twinkling as he looked at Evelyn. And the lady guest room in the main house. Cole grabbed Evelyn's carpet bag from where it was tied to the saddle. I'll get her settled myself. Sam grinned knowingly, which made Evelyn bristle slightly. but she said nothing. She was tired, dusty, and increasingly aware that she hadn't eaten since breakfast. Pick your battles, her mother used to say. This wasn't one worth fighting.
This story was
The
posted
inside of
on
the
the
house
channel
was even
west
more
of
surprising
Betrayal.
than the exterior.
Please do not repost
The front door
it in
opened
any
into
form.
a spacious room with exposed beam ceilings, comfortable furniture that showed signs of actual use rather than just decoration, and most unexpectedly, bookshelves. Actual bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes that looked well-read rather than merely decorative. Evelyn stopped in her tracks, staring. "You seem surprised," Cole observed, setting down her bag. "I am," she admitted. "I didn't expect—" She trailed off, not wanting to sound insulting. "You didn't expect a Montana rancher to read—" He said it without rancor, merely stating a fact. "My mother was a school teacher from Philadelphia. She insisted that books were as essential as cattle or horses. Maybe more so." He gestured toward the stairs. "Your room is up here. There's a wash basin with fresh water, and I'll bring you hot water for a bath if you'd like." "That would be—" Evelyn paused, pride warring with exhaustion and genuine need. "That would be very kind. Thank you." The guest room was simple but clean, with a real bed, not a cot, but an actual bed with a quilted coverlet, a sturdy dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the darkening prairie. True to his word, there was a lock on the door. Evelyn locked it as soon as Cole left, then sank down onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of pure relief. She'd made it. Not to Silver Ridge yet, but to safety, to shelter, to a place where she could breathe without wondering what danger lurked in the next moment. A knock came at the door 20 minutes later. "Miss Hart, I have hot water for you." She opened the door to find Cole holding a large pitcher, steam rising from it in soft curls. Behind him, a young Mexican woman carried towels and what looked like a tray of food. "This is Maria," Cole said. "She helps run the house. She thought you might be hungry." "Starving, actually," Evelyn admitted. "Thank you." Maria smiled warmly, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "Is nothing fancy, señorita. Just stew and bread, but is hot and filling. It smells wonderful." After they left, and after Evelyn locked the door again, she poured the hot water into the basin and washed away the layers of dust and tension from the day. Then she sat at the table and ate slowly, savoring every bite of the rich, hearty stew. Through the window, she could see stars beginning to emerge sharp and bright in the enormous Montana sky. She thought about Cole Barrington, about the unexpected kindness in his eyes, the easy competence in how he handled both horses and people, the books on his shelves that suggested depths she hadn't anticipated. He wasn't what she expected from a Western rancher, which both intrigued and unsettled her. "Don't be foolish," she told herself firmly. "You're here to teach, to build a life on your own terms, not to be distracted by a handsome man with gray eyes and calloused hands." But even as she thought it, she found herself wondering about him, about what had brought him here, what had shaped him, what he thought about when he looked out at this vast, beautiful, dangerous land. What? She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar room and the quality of light streaming through the window, Evelyn couldn't remember where she was. Then memory returned in a rush, the broken wheel, the gunshots, Cole Barrington appearing like something out of a dime novel. She dressed quickly in her traveling suit, pinned her dark hair into a neat chignon, and made her way downstairs following the sounds and smells coming from what she assumed was the kitchen. She found Cole standing at a large cast-iron stove, expertly flipping bacon in a skillet. He'd changed from yesterday's dusty clothes into a clean shirt and vest, and his hair was still damp, suggesting he'd washed recently. He looked up when she entered, and that slow smile appeared again. "Morning, Miss Hart. I hope you slept well." "I did, surprisingly." She looked around the spacious kitchen, noting the orderliness of it, the herbs hanging to dry near the window, the bread cooling on the counter. "Where's Maria?" "It's her day off. She lives with her family about 3 miles from here." He poured coffee into a heavy ceramic mug and handed it to her. "I hope you don't mind fending for yourself for breakfast. I'm a decent cook, but I'm no match for Maria's skills." Evelyn accepted the coffee, gratefully wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "You're cooking breakfast for me." "Well, for us. Mr. Henderson already ate with the men in the bunkhouse. He's out looking at the stagecoach situation with Sam right now." Cole plated bacon and eggs with efficient movements. Sit. Eat. Then we'll figure out how to get you on your way to Silver Ridge. She sat at the heavy wooden table feeling oddly domestic in this stranger's kitchen. Through the window, she could see the ranch coming to life, men moving between buildings, horses being led to pasture, the whole complex machinery of a working ranch in motion. How many people work here? She asked. 15, give or take, depending on the season. More during roundup. Cole brought 2 plates to the table and sat across from her. It's a big operation. Takes a lot of hands to run it properly. Evelyn cut into her eggs, which were perfectly cooked. And you manage it all yourself. I have a good foreman, Sam, the man you met last night. He's been with the ranch since my father started it. Between us, we keep things running. He paused, then asked, what takes you to Silver Ridge, if you don't mind my asking? It's not exactly a destination most people choose. I have a teaching contract, Evelyn said, pride evident in her voice. The town needs a school teacher, and I need... She trailed off, not sure how much to reveal to this near stranger. A fresh start, Cole suggested gently. Independence, she corrected. In Boston, opportunities for women are limited, especially for women who aren't interested in simply becoming wives and mothers. She met his gaze, directly challenging him to judge her. I want to make a difference in the world, Mr. Barrington. I want to teach to shape young minds to contribute something meaningful. That's difficult to do when society expects you to simply find a husband and fade into domestic obscurity. Instead of looking scandalized or dismissive, Cole nodded thoughtfully. My mother felt the same way. She kept teaching even after she married my father, which scandalized half of Philadelphia. But she said education was too important to abandon just because she'd taken a husband. He smiled slightly. She would have liked you, I think. Would have... She died 6 years ago. Fever. The pain was still evident in his voice despite the passage of time. She and my father both within a month of each other. It was hard. I'm sorry, Evelyn said, and meant it. That must have been devastating. It was. But it also taught me something. Cole looked out the window at his ranch. Life is short and uncertain out here, Miss Hart. You can't waste time on things that don't matter or wait for the perfect moment to do what you know you should do. My parents loved each other fiercely, and they lived fully every day they had together. That's not a bad example to follow. Evelyn found herself studying him with new appreciation. There was wisdom in his words, a depth of understanding that came from genuine loss and reflection rather than empty platitudes. You're not what I expected, she said before she could stop herself. His eyes found hers, a hint of amusement in their gray depths. What did you expect? I don't know, someone more... She gestured vaguely. Rough, uneducated. The frontier has a certain reputation in Boston. And how's that reputation holding up so far? It's been more complicated than I anticipated, she admitted. The landscape is beautiful but harsh. The people seem both kinder and more dangerous than I expected. And you... She stopped, suddenly aware that she was about to say something too revealing. And me, he prompted, his voice soft. You're not like other men I've known, she said finally, then immediately regretted it. It sounded foolish, like something from a romantic novel, but Cole didn't laugh. Instead, he looked at her with sudden intensity. And you're not like other women I've known, Miss Hart. You rode 20 miles behind me on horseback without complaining once. You held a gun on me with steady hands and weren't afraid to speak your mind. And you're heading out to a rough frontier town to teach children, most of whom probably don't want to be taught because you believe education matters more than comfort or safety. He paused. That takes courage. Real courage, not the kind that comes from bravado or ignorance. Evelyn felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. I'm just doing what needs to be done. Most people don't. They find excuses or they quit when things get hard. But I don't think you're the quitting type. Before Evelyn could respond, the kitchen door opened and Sam entered, his expression apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we've got a problem with the stagecoach. Cole stood immediately. What kind of problem? The axle's worse than we thought. Even with our spare wheel, it's not going to hold for a 20-mile journey. Not safely. Sam looked at Evelyn with regret. We can fix it proper, but it'll take 2, maybe 3 days to get the parts we need from town and do the work right. Evelyn's stomach sank. 3 days? I'm sorry, ma'am. but Mr. Henderson agrees trying to make it to Silver Ridge on that axle would be dangerous. It could collapse
This story was
completely,
posted on the
maybe cause
channel
an
west
accident.
of Betrayal.
Cole was
Please do
already
not
moving toward
repost
the
it
door.
in any form.
Let me look at it. Evelyn followed her mind racing. 3 days. She'd sent word ahead to Silver Ridge that she'd arrived this week. The school board would be expecting her. What would they think if she simply failed to appear? Outside, the morning sun was bright and warm, promising another hot day. The stagecoach stood near the barn looking forlorn with its broken wheel removed and the damaged axle exposed. Cole examined it thoroughly, his expression growing more serious. "Sam's right," he said finally. "This needs proper repair. I can ride to Silver Ridge today, let them know what happened, pick up the parts we need, but the actual work will take time." "I can't impose on your hospitality for 3 days," Evelyn protested. "It's not an imposition. You're welcome to stay as long as necessary." Cole straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Alternatively, I could take you to Silver Ridge today on horseback, though that's a long, hard ride for someone not used to it. Or we could wait until the stagecoach is fixed. Your choice." Evelyn considered her options. She'd ridden behind Cole yesterday for 40 minutes and had been sore afterward. 20 miles on horseback would be significantly worse, and she'd arrive in Silver Ridge looking bedraggled and exhausted, not exactly the professional image she wanted to present for her first day. "I'll wait," she decided. "If you're certain it's no trouble." "No trouble at all, Shay," Cole assured her. Then with that slight smile again, he added, "Besides, it'll give you a chance to see if the Frontier reputation holds up under closer inspection." The next 3 days passed in a way Evelyn never could have anticipated. Cole rode to Silver Ridge that first morning, returning by early afternoon with news that the school board had been understanding about the delay in supplies for the repair. He also brought back Evelyn's trunk, which had been forwarded from the previous stage stop, and a packet of letters that had been waiting for her. "Miss Hart," Cole knocked on her door late that afternoon. "I thought you might want your trunk, and Maria's back. She's prepared a proper dinner if you'd like to join me." Dinner became a revelation. Evelyn had expected awkward silences, perhaps, or stilted conversation with a man she barely knew. Instead, she found herself engaged in the most stimulating discussion she'd had in months. Cole was remarkably well-read with opinions on everything from Dickens to Darwin, and he listened to her perspectives with genuine interest rather than the patronizing attention most men showed when women expressed intellectual opinions. "So you believe women should have the vote?" he asked over Maria's excellent roast chicken. "I believe all people should have the vote," Evelyn replied firmly. "Denying half the population a voice in their own governance is both morally wrong and practically foolish. Women have insights and perspectives that are essential to good decision-making." "I agree," Cole said simply. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "You do?" "My mother was the smartest person I ever knew. Smarter than my father, smarter than most men in town, certainly smarter than me in a lot of ways." He poured more wine into her glass. "The idea that she shouldn't have had a say in how our country was run simply because of her gender always struck me as absurd." "That's refreshingly progressive for a Montana rancher." "Maybe I'm not like other Montana ranchers," he said, echoing her earlier words with a hint of amusement. The second day, Cole showed her the ranch. They rode out on horseback. He provided her with a gentle mare named Daisy and a split skirt that belonged to Maria's sister, and he explained the operation with obvious pride. She learned about cattle breeding water rights, the delicate balance between grazing land and sustainability. She met his men who treated her with respect that seemed genuine rather than performative. But what struck her most was how Cole moved through his world. He knew every horse by name, greeted each worker with personal questions about their families, and handled problems with calm competence. When they found a section of fence down and 3 cattle wandering onto a neighbor's property, he didn't rage or blame. He simply gathered the cattle, fixed the fence, and made a note to check the other sections before week's end. "You're good at this," Evelyn observed as they rode back toward the house in the golden afternoon light. "At what?" "Leading, managing, caring for people and animals and land." She hesitated, then added, "It's not just about profit for you, is it?" "It's about stewardship." Cole looked pleased. "My father used to say that land isn't something you own, it's something you borrow from future generations. Our job is to leave it better than we found it, whether that's the land itself or the people who depend on it." I like that philosophy. I thought you might. He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. You have the same approach to teaching, don't you? It's not just about filling heads with facts. It's about shaping future generations. Exactly. Evelyn felt a rush of pleasure that he understood. Every child I teach is someone who'll go on to influence the world in some way. If I can give them tools to think critically, to question, to engage with ideas that ripples forward. Like throwing a stone in a pond, Cole said softly. Yes, exactly like that. That evening, after another excellent dinner and hours of conversation, Evelyn retired to her room feeling strangely unsettled. She sat at the window looking out at the stars that seemed impossibly bright in the Montana darkness and forced herself to confront an uncomfortable truth. She was developing feelings for Cole Barrington. It was foolish, she told herself, dangerous. She'd come west to build an independent life, not to fall for the first handsome rancher who showed her kindness. Besides, she barely knew him. 3 days wasn't enough time to truly understand someone, to know their character deeply enough to risk your heart. But even as she thought this, she knew she was lying to herself. She'd spent more meaningful time with Cole in 3 days than she'd spent with men in Boston she'd known for years. The conversations they'd had, the moments of shared laughter and serious discussion, the way he looked at her as if she were genuinely interesting rather than merely decorative, it all added up to something real. And that terrified her. Focus on the plan, she told herself firmly. Arrive in Silver Ridge, establish yourself as a teacher, build your independent life. Don't be distracted by gray eyes and calloused hands and conversations that make you feel truly seen for the first time in your life. But her heart, stubborn and foolish, wasn't listening. The third day dawned with the stagecoach finally repaired. Henderson tested it thoroughly, pronouncing it sound and ready for travel. Cole had a horse saddled for himself, preparing to escort them the rest of the way to Silver Ridge. You don't have to do that, Evelyn said as she loaded her carpet bag into the coach, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest at the thought of leaving. I know I don't have to. I want to. Cole checked the stagecoach connections himself, ensuring everything was secure. Besides, Sam can handle things here for a day. And I'd like to see Silver Ridge again. It's been a few months. The ride to town took most of the morning. Evelyn sat inside the coach watching the landscape roll past, trying to focus on her upcoming responsibilities rather than the man riding alongside. But her traitorous eyes kept drifting to him, the easy way he sat in the saddle, the alert manner in which he scanned their surroundings, the strength evident in every movement. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat the lunch Maria had packed. Cole found shade beneath a cluster of cottonwood trees near a small creek, and they sat on the grass eating cold chicken and fresh bread. Are you nervous? He asked. About starting your teaching position? Yes and no, Evelyn admitted. I'm confident in my abilities. I've been preparing for this for years, but I'm also aware that frontier towns can be resistant to new ideas, particularly when they come from Eastern women. Silver Ridge is a good town, Cole said. Rough around the edges, sure, but the people are fair-minded for the most part. They'll give you a chance. What you do with that chance is up to you. That's all I ask, a chance to prove myself. Cole was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, Miss Hart Evelyn, if I may, I want you to know that if you ever need anything at all, the Double B is always open to you. You're not alone out here. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. His gray eyes were serious, almost vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. That's very kind, she said softly. Thank you. It's not just kindness. He hesitated, seeming to struggle with his words. These past 3 days have been, I've enjoyed your company. More than I've enjoyed anyone's company in a very long time. I know you came west to build an independent life, and I respect that, but I hope we can be friends at least. I'd like that, Evelyn said, and realized she meant it completely. They reached Silver Ridge in the early afternoon. The town was larger than Evelyn expected, a main street lined with substantial buildings, side streets, branching off into residential areas, signs of growth and permanence rather than the temporary mining camp she'd imagined. The stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of a building marked Silver Ridge Hotel and Boarding House. And suddenly, this was real. This was where her new life would begin. Cole dismounted and helped her down from the coach, his hands steady on her waist. For a moment they stood close together, and Evelyn was acutely aware of his warmth, His strength, the way he was looking at her as if memorizing her face. "Good luck, Evelyn Hart," he said quietly. "Show them what a
This
Boston
story was
school
posted
teacher
on
can
the
do.
channel west of Betrayal.
Thank you for
Please do not
everything, Cole
repost it
Barrington."
in any form.
She forced herself to step back to break the connection. For the shelter, the kindness, the conversation. It meant more than you know. It meant something to me, too. A woman bustled out of the hotel, middle-aged, efficient-looking, with kind eyes and a practical manner. "You must be Miss Hart. We've been expecting you. I'm Mrs. Patterson. I run the boarding house where you'll be staying. Let me help you get settled." Evelyn allowed herself to be swept into the flurry of activity, meeting townspeople, seeing her small but clean boarding room, receiving schedules and information about the school. Through it all, she was aware of Cole watching from across the street, leaning against a post with his hat tipped back, that slight smile on his face. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, she saw him prepare to leave. He caught her eye touch the brim of his hat in that archaic gesture of respect, and mounted his horse. Evelyn watched him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the vast Montana landscape, and felt her heart clench with an emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. This is what you wanted, she reminded herself. Independence, purpose, a life of your own making. But as Cole Barrington disappeared over the rise, heading back to his ranch and his responsibilities, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she'd left something important behind, something she might never find again. Mrs. Patterson's cheerful voice interrupted her reverie. "Come along, dear. Let me show you the schoolhouse. It's small, but we've done our best to make it welcoming. I think you'll be pleased." Evelyn turned away from the empty road and followed Mrs. Patterson toward her future, carrying with her the memory of 3 unexpected days, stimulating conversations, and a pair of gray eyes that had looked at her as if she were someone worth knowing. The adventure was just beginning. The schoolhouse was smaller than Evelyn had imagined, but there was something hopeful about it, the way the afternoon light streamed through the windows, catching dust motes that danced like tiny stars, the smell of fresh whitewash on the walls, the neat rows of desks that someone had clearly labored to arrange. Mrs. Patterson led her through the single room with obvious pride, pointing out the slate board, the few worn textbooks stacked on the teacher's desk, the pot-bellied stove that would provide heat when autumn arrived. "It's not much," Mrs. Patterson said, a note of apology in her voice, "but it's ours and we're proud of it. Silver Ridge has been trying to keep a teacher for 3 years now. The last 2 didn't make it past a month." Evelyn turned from the window where she'd been studying the view of the main street. "Why not?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then sighed. Different reasons. The first one was a young man from Ohio, nice enough fellow, but he couldn't handle the children. They ran roughshod over him, and he left in frustration. The second was a woman from Missouri. The older woman paused, choosing her words carefully. She expected a certain level of civilization that Silver Ridge couldn't provide. She found us too rough, too unrefined. After 4 weeks, she returned east. "I see." Evelyn walked slowly between the desks, running her fingers along the worn wood. She could feel the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders, the silent pressure to succeed where others had failed. "How many students should I expect?" "Anywhere from 15 to 25, depending on the season. More in winter when there's less farm work. The ages range from 6 to 16, though the older ones don't come regularly." Mrs. Patterson moved to straighten a desk that didn't need straightening, a nervous gesture. "I won't lie to you, Miss Hart. Some of them can be difficult. A few of the boys think schooling is a waste of time, and their parents agree. You'll have your work cut out for you." "Good," Evelyn said firmly, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. "I didn't come all this way for an easy position. I came to make a difference." Mrs. Patterson's face broke into a genuine smile. "I believe you might just do that, my dear. You have a certain quality about you, a determination. I saw it in your eyes when you arrived." She moved toward the door. "Come along now. You'll want to rest before dinner. School starts tomorrow and you'll need your strength." That evening, Evelyn sat at the small desk in her boarding room preparing lessons by lamplight. She'd brought her favorite books from Boston, volumes of poetry histories, mathematics texts, novels that had shaped her own education. Now she arranged them carefully, planning how to introduce ideas that would challenge and engage minds that might be resistant to learning. But her thoughts kept drifting to Cole Barrington, to the conversations they'd shared, the way he'd looked at her in that final moment before riding away the unexpected ache she felt at his absence. She forced herself to focus on the task at hand, reminding herself that she had work to do, a purpose to fulfill. Romance, if that's what these feelings were, would only complicate things. She fell asleep with her head on her lesson plans, dreaming of gray eyes and endless Montana skies. The next morning arrived with a flutter of nervous energy in her stomach. Evelyn, dressed carefully in a practical dark blue dress, pinned her hair into a severe bun that she hoped projected authority, and walked the 3 blocks to the schoolhouse with her books clutched against her chest like armor. She arrived 30 minutes early to find the door already open and a tall, gangly boy of about 15 lounging against her desk, his boots leaving muddy marks on the wood. "You the new teacher?" he asked, looking her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I am, Miss Hart." Evelyn set her books down and met his gaze directly. "And you are Jack Morrison. My pa says teachers are a waste of money, but the town makes us come anyway." He made no move to get off her desk. "How long you figure you'll last?" "We're taking bets. I say 2 weeks." "Then you're going to lose your money," Evelyn replied calmly. "Now get off my desk, take a seat, and prepare to learn something." Something flickered in Jack's eyes, surprise perhaps, or grudging respect. He pushed off the desk slowly, deliberately, knocking over her carefully stacked books as he did so. Papers scattered across the floor. Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't show any reaction beyond calmly bending to retrieve them. "One more stunt like that, Mr. Morrison, and you'll spend your first day writing an essay on respect. 5 pages. Do we understand each other?" Jack's jaw tightened, but he nodded and slouched toward a desk in the back corner. By the time the 8 o'clock bell rang, actually a triangle that Mrs. Patterson struck with vigor, Evelyn had 23 students ranging from tiny 6-year-old Emma Patterson, the boarding house owner's granddaughter, to Jack Morrison, and 2 other sullen teenagers who clearly didn't want to be there. "Good morning," Evelyn said, standing at the front of the classroom with her spine straight and her voice clear. "My name is Miss Hart. I've come from Boston to be your teacher, and I want to make something very clear from the start. This classroom is a place of learning, respect, and possibility. Every single one of you has potential to think, to grow, to become something more than you are today. My job is to help you discover that potential. Your job is to be willing to try." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room, making eye contact with each student. "I know some of you don't want to be here. I know some of you think education is pointless, but I'm going to prove you wrong. We're going to read stories that make you feel something. We're going to solve problems that challenge your mind. We're going to discuss ideas that matter, and by the end of this year, you're going to understand why learning is the most powerful tool you'll ever possess." A small hand went up in the front row. Emma Patterson, her blonde curls tied with a blue ribbon, looked up at Evelyn with wide eyes. "Miss Hart, can we really read stories every single day?" Evelyn promised, and was rewarded with a smile that could have lit the entire room. The first day was exactly as difficult as she'd expected. The younger children were restless and easily distracted. The middle group, ages 9 through 12, were a mixed bag of genuine interest and rebellious energy. And the teenagers, led by Jack Morrison, tested her patience at every turn with deliberately wrong answers, whispered conversations, and barely concealed contempt. But Evelyn had been prepared for resistance. She'd taught Sunday school to unruly children in Boston's poorest neighborhoods. She'd tutored the spoiled daughters of wealthy families who thought education was beneath them. She knew how to be firm without being cruel, how to engage without pandering, how to make learning feel like discovery rather than drudgery. By the end of that first week, she'd established a rhythm. Mornings were for basic skills, reading, writing, arithmetic, tailored to different age groups while keeping everyone engaged. Afternoons were for discussions, stories, and projects that required thinking rather than mere memorization. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to see changes. Emma Patterson read her first complete sentence and burst into tears of joy. A quiet boy named Thomas solved a mathematics problem that had stumped him for days and actually smiled. Even Jack Morrison, though he'd never admit it, seemed interested when Evelyn read aloud from The Last of the Mohicans, changing her voice for different characters and building suspense until you could hear a pin drop in the silent classroom. On Friday afternoon of her second week as students filed out chattering about the story she'd just read, Jack paused at
This
her
story
desk.
was posted on the channel
That
west
book,
of Betrayal.
he said gruffly.
Please do
The
not
one about the
repost it
frontier.
in any form.
You got more like that? I do, Evelyn replied, keeping her voice neutral, despite her internal triumph. Would you like to borrow it? He shrugged, trying to seem indifferent. Maybe, if you don't need it. I'll bring it Monday. She met his eyes. There's one condition, though. His guard went up immediately. What? You have to tell me what you think about it. Really think not just that it was fine or okay. I want to know what you connected with, what you didn't understand, what made you feel something. Jack considered this, then nodded slowly. Deal. After he left, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. One battle won. Hundreds more to go, but it was a start. She was locking the schoolhouse door when she heard the familiar sound of hoofbeats. Her heart jumped, she couldn't help it. And when she turned, there was Cole Barrington riding up the street on that same sturdy horse, his figure silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. Miss Hart, he said, touching his hat brim in greeting as he dismounted. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. Evelyn was acutely aware of her racing pulse of how glad she was to see him. What brings you to Silver Ridge? Business in town, he said, then added with that slight smile. And I wanted to see how your first week went. I brought you something. He pulled a package wrapped in brown paper from his saddlebag and handed it to her. Evelyn opened it carefully to find 3 books, 2 years before the mast. Walden, and a collection of Whitman's poetry. You mentioned you were short on reading material for your students, Cole said. These were my mother's. I thought they might be useful. Evelyn looked up at him, touched by the gesture. Cole, I can't take your mother's books. You're not taking them. I'm lending them, or donating them to the school if you prefer. His gray eyes were warm. She would have wanted them to be used to help shape young minds. That's what she believed in. Then thank you, Evelyn said softly. This means more than you know. They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged with things unsaid. Then Cole cleared his throat. I was wondering if you're free this evening. Mrs. Patterson mentioned there's a decent restaurant in town. The Silver Spoon. Would you join me for dinner? Evelyn knew she should say no. She should maintain professional distance, focus on her work, not complicate things with feelings she wasn't ready to examine. But the hope in his eyes, the way he was looking at her, as if her answer truly mattered, she couldn't bring herself to refuse. I'd like that, she heard herself say. The Silver Spoon was a small but surprisingly refined establishment run by a French woman named Madame Dubois, who'd somehow ended up in Montana territory and decided to bring civilization with her. The food was excellent beef stew with herbs. Evelyn couldn't identify fresh bred vegetables that actually had flavor, and the conversation was even better. Cole asked about her students, her challenges, her triumphs. He listened with genuine interest as she described Jack Morrison's grudging request for a book. Emma's reading break through the delicate balance she was trying to strike between structure and engagement. You care about them, he observed. Not just about teaching in the abstract, but about each individual child. Of course I do. They're people, not just vessels to be filled with information. Evelyn paused, then added, That's something most educators forget. They see teaching as a transaction knowledge and obedience out. But real education is about relationship, about understanding who each student is and what they need to flourish. My mother said almost exactly the same thing once, Cole said quietly. She said every child was a unique puzzle, and good teaching was about finding the right key to unlock their potential. She was a wise woman. She was, he smiled, and she would have liked you tremendously. Over the next several weeks, a pattern emerged. Cole found reasons to visit Silver Ridge regularly. Business with the general store meetings with other ranchers' supplies that needed ordering. And each time he would stop by the schoolhouse to see Evelyn, often bringing books fresh fruit from his ranch's small orchard, or simply his presence and conversation. The townspeople noticed, of course. Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. Madame Dubois at the Silver Spoon always had the best table available when they arrived. Even some of Evelyn's students began making knowing comments, which she deflected with stern looks and subject changes. But Evelyn couldn't deny the truth, at least not to herself. She looked forward to Cole's visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. Their conversations had deepened beyond mere pleasantries into discussions of philosophy, politics, dreams, and fears. He told her about losing his parents, about the weight of responsibility that came with running a ranch, about his hope to build something lasting that would benefit not just himself, but the whole community. She told him about her childhood in Boston, about watching her mother fade into the background of her father's important career, about her determination to be more than just someone's wife or daughter. She told him about the loneliness of being an educated woman in a society that valued women for their beauty and compliance rather than their minds. "Do you ever regret coming west?" Cole asked one evening as they walked along Silver Ridge's main street after dinner. "No," Evelyn said immediately. "Not for a moment. This is where I'm meant to be. Even though it's harder than you expected. Especially because it's harder." She looked up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "Easy things don't change us, Cole. It's the difficult challenges that reveal who we really are and who we can become." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You amaze me, Evelyn Hart. Your courage, your convictions, your refusal to compromise what you believe in." His voice dropped lower. "I've never met anyone like you." "And you amaze me," she admitted, her heart pounding. "Your integrity, your kindness, the way you lead without dominating. You're different from other men." He suggested a hint of teasing in his tone. "Yes," she said firmly. "Exactly that." They stood close together in the gathering darkness, and Evelyn was acutely aware of how much she wanted him to kiss her, how dangerous that desire was, how it threatened everything she'd come west to build. Cole seemed to sense her internal struggle. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "I should let you get back to Mrs. Patterson's. You have school tomorrow." "Yes. Thank you for dinner." "Evelyn." He caught her hand briefly, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I know you came here to build an independent life. I respect that. I admire it. But I hope you know that wanting independence and accepting companionship aren't mutually exclusive. You don't have to do everything alone." "I know," she said softly. "I'm learning that." By her 6th week in Silver Ridge, Evelyn had established herself as more than just the school teacher. She'd earned the respect of parents who initially doubted her, won over students who'd been determined to defeat her, and become a valued member of the community. When the general store owner's wife fell ill, Evelyn organized the older students to help with deliveries. When a family's barn burned down, she led a fundraising effort that brought the entire town together. And then she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She announced that she would be holding evening classes for adults who wanted to learn to read. The town meeting where she made this announcement was packed into the small church that doubled as a community gathering space. Evelyn stood at the front, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "I know many of you never had the opportunity for education," she said. "Maybe your families couldn't spare you from farm work. Maybe there were no schools where you grew up. Maybe you learned other valuable skills, blacksmithing, ranching, homemaking, and there simply wasn't time for reading and writing." She paused, looking around at the weathered faces, men and women who'd built this town with their own hands, who worked from dawn to dusk, who'd carved lives out of unforgiving territory. "But I also know that some of you wish you could read. Read the Bible yourselves instead of relying on others. Read letters from family back east. Read contracts before signing them. Read stories to your children." Her voice grew more passionate. "Reading is power. It's independence. It's freedom. And it's never too late to learn." There was a long silence. Then from the back of the room, a weathered rancher named Tom Sullivan stood up slowly. "I'm 53 years old," he said gruffly. "Never learned my letters. Always felt ashamed of it, if I'm being honest. You really think you could teach an old man like me?" "I know I can," Evelyn said firmly, "if you're willing to try." Tom nodded slowly. "Then count me in." One by one, others stood. The blacksmith's wife, a young miner who'd come from Ireland, Mrs. Patterson herself, who admitted she'd learned only the barest basics as a child. By the end of the meeting, Evelyn had 15 adults committed to evening classes 3 nights a week. Cole, who'd been standing quietly at the side of the room, caught her eye and smiled with such pride and admiration that it made her breath catch. After the meeting, as people filed out chattering with excitement and nervousness, he approached her. That was extraordinary, he said quietly. You're changing this town, Evelyn. I'm just doing what needs
This
to be
story
done.
was posted on the channel
No.
West of
He
Betrayal.
shook his head.
Please do not
You're
repost
doing
it
what
in any
others never
form.
thought to do. There's a difference. He hesitated, then added, I'm proud to know you. The evening classes began the following week and quickly became one of Evelyn's greatest sources of satisfaction. Teaching adults was different from teaching children. They brought life experience and determination, but also fear of failure and embarrassment. She worked to make the classes welcoming and shame-free, celebrating every small victory and creating a supportive environment where mistakes were expected and learning was communal. Tom Sullivan wept the first time he successfully wrote his own name. Mrs. Patterson read her first complete sentence from the Bible and had to sit down from the emotion of it. The young Irish miner Sean O'Brien progressed so rapidly that Evelyn began lending him books within a month. Cole attended several of the evening classes, though he clearly didn't need the instruction. Evelyn realized he was there to show support, to demonstrate that learning was valuable, regardless of age or status. His presence encouraged others, particularly the men who might have felt foolish admitting they couldn't read. But as September turned to October and the Montana autumn painted the mountains in gold and crimson, a darker element entered their peaceful world. His name was Reeves, and he led a gang of outlaws who'd been terrorizing settlements throughout the territory. Evelyn first heard about him from Mrs. Patterson, who'd gotten the news from a traveling merchant. They hit the Miller Ranch 2 days ago, Mrs. Patterson said, her face tight with worry. Stole horses' supplies and shot Miller's eldest son when he tried to stop them. The boy will live, thank God, but just barely. Have they come near Silver Ridge? Evelyn asked. Not yet, but the sheriff thinks it's only a matter of time. He's asked all the ranchers to be vigilant. Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice. They say Reeves is a cruel man, intelligent but with no conscience. He takes what he wants and hurts anyone who gets in his way. Evelyn felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. What can we do? Be careful. Don't travel alone. If you see strangers, report them immediately to the sheriff. Mrs. Patterson gripped her hand. I know you're independent, dear, but please don't take unnecessary risks. I won't, Evelyn promised, though she wasn't entirely sure what counted as unnecessary in this context. The following Saturday, Cole arrived at the boarding house earlier than usual, his expression serious. I need to talk to you, he said without preamble. They walked to the small park at the edge of town where benches overlooked the valley. Cole waited until they were seated before speaking. You've heard about Reeves, Yes, Mrs. Patterson told me. It's worse than most people realize. Cole's jaw was tight. He's not just a common thief. He's systematic, intelligent, and ruthless. He picks targets carefully isolated ranches, small settlements, places where resistance will be minimal. And he's moving closer to Silver Ridge, Eek. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to be extremely careful. No more riding out to visit students' families alone. No more late walks by yourself. And he paused, clearly struggling with his next words. I'm saying I'm worried about you, Evelyn. Deeply worried. Something in his tone made her turn to face him fully. His gray eyes were dark with emotion. Fear, yes, but also something deeper. Something that made her heart race. Cole, I care about you, he said quietly. More than I should, probably given that you've made it clear you're here to build an independent life. But I can't help it. These past months getting to know you, watching you transform this town, talking with you about everything and nothing. He took a breath. You've become important to me, vitally important. And the thought of anything happening to you, Evelyn reached out and touched his hand, a gesture that felt both natural and momentous. I care about you too, she admitted. I've been trying to stay focused on my work. But the truth is, I look forward to your visits more than anything else in my week. You've become... She was interrupted by the sound of galloping horses and shouting from the main street. They both jumped up instinctively, moving toward the commotion. A young boy, one of the rancher's sons, was riding hard into town, his face flushed with exertion and fear. Sheriff, he was yelling. Sheriff Dawson! They hit our place, Reeves and his gang. The sheriff emerged from his office, followed quickly by several armed townsmen. Cole was already moving his hand on the revolver at his hip. What happened, Billy? Sheriff Dawson demanded. They came at dawn. The boy gasped, struggling to catch his breath. Pa was in the barn. They shot at him, stole 4 horses, took all our supplies. Ma's with him now, he's hurt bad. How many were there? Cole asked. 6, maybe 7. Led by a man with a scar down his face. Pa said it was Reeves. The sheriff was already organizing a posse. We're going after them. Cole, you coming? Yes, Cole said immediately. Then he turned to Evelyn. Go back to Mrs. Patterson's. Stay inside. Promise me. I promise, she said, though part of her chafed at the instruction. Cole held her gaze for a long moment, his eyes conveying everything he couldn't say in front of the gathered crowd. Then he squeezed her hand briefly and moved to join the men gathering horses and weapons. Evelyn watched them ride out a tight knot of fear in her chest. She'd known life on the frontier was dangerous, but knowing it abstractly and experiencing it directly were vastly different things. The posse returned 3 days later empty-handed and frustrated. Reeves had disappeared into the mountains, his trail lost in the rocky terrain. The wounded rancher would recover, but the stolen horses and supplies were gone, and the gang remained at large. Cole came to see Evelyn the evening they returned, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. We couldn't track them, he said, accepting the coffee she offered. They're too experienced, too familiar with the territory. The sheriff thinks they have a hideout somewhere in the high country. Will they come back? Probably. Men like Reeves don't stop until they're caught or killed. He set down the coffee cup. Evelyn, I want you to consider something. What? Coming to stay at the ranch for a while. You, Mrs. Patterson, any of the women in town who'd feel safer. I have the space and the ranch is well defended. We have enough men to keep watch. I can't just abandon my students, but Evelyn protested. I'm not suggesting you abandon them, but you could travel to and from school with an escort, at least until Reeves is caught. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Please, Evelyn, I know you value your independence, and I admire that, but independence doesn't mean being foolish about real danger. She wanted to argue, to insist she could take care of herself, but the fear in his eyes, the genuine concern, it touched something deep inside her. I'll think about it, she said finally. 2 weeks later, the decision was made for her. Evelyn had been visiting the Hendersons, the same family whose stagecoach had broken down, bringing her to Cole's ranch months ago. Their daughter Sarah was struggling with reading, and Evelyn had promised extra help. The visit had gone longer than planned, and by the time she left, the sun was low on the horizon. She was writing Daisy Cole had insisted she borrow the gentle mare for any trips outside town when she saw the riders ahead on the trail. 6 men, rough-looking, sitting their horses in a way that blocked the road. The one in front had a scar running down the left side of his face, pulling his mouth into a permanent sneer. Reeves! Every instinct screamed at Evelyn to turn and run, but she was close enough that they'd easily catch her. Instead, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed, she kept riding at a steady pace, her hand moving to the small revolver in her pocket. Well, well, Reeves said as she approached, his voice surprisingly cultured. A lady traveling alone. That's not very wise in these parts. I'm heading home, Evelyn said, keeping her voice level. I have no quarrel with you. Home being Silver Ridge. He smiled, and it was one of the cruelest expressions she'd ever seen. Convenient. We were planning to visit there ourselves. Silver Ridge has been too quiet lately. Time to remind them that law is a fragile thing out here. Leave Silver Ridge alone, Evelyn said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Those are hard-working people trying to build decent lives. Reeves laughed. And who are you to tell me what to do, a school teacher? I'd wager from that proper way you sit your horse and those books in your saddlebag. I'm someone who knows that 6 men against an entire town is poor odds, Evelyn replied, her mind racing. Silver Ridge has a sheriff, deputies, and at least 30 men who know how to shoot. You might take some supplies, but you'll also take bullets. Is it worth it? Something flickered in Reeves's eyes, calculation, reassessment. You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm practical. Evelyn forced herself to meet his gaze directly. There are easier targets than Silver Ridge, towns with less defense ranches with fewer men. Why risk a fight when you could get what you need elsewhere? One of Reeves' men shifted in his saddle. She's got a point, boss. That town's got more guns than most. Reeves studied Evelyn for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. Then to her shock, he laughed a genuine sound of surprised amusement. You know what I like, you school teacher? You've got spine. He tipped his hat mockingly. Consider this your lucky day. We'll find our entertainment elsewhere. But you might want to be more careful about traveling alone. Next
This
time
story
you
was
might not meet
posted on
someone
the
as
channel
generous
West
as
of
me.
Betrayal.
He
Please
wheeled his
do not
horse around
repost
and his
it
men
in any
followed.
form.
Within moments, they disappeared over the rise, leaving Evelyn alone on the trail with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She made it another quarter mile before the reaction set in. Her hands began shaking so violently she could barely hold the reins. She dismounted on trembling legs and leaned against Daisy, forcing herself to breathe slowly until the worst of the terror passed. Then she remounted and rode for Silver Ridge as fast as the mare could safely go. Cole was in town when she arrived. Thank God. She found him at the general store discussing supplies with the owner. The moment he saw her face, he was at her side. What happened? The story poured out of her, the encounter Reeves, the veiled threat against Silver Ridge, her desperate gambit that had somehow worked. Cole's face went progressively darker as she spoke, his jaw clenching with barely controlled fury. You could have been killed, he said when she finished, or worse. But I wasn't. You were incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. He gripped her shoulders gently. Evelyn, do you understand what could have happened? Men like Reeves don't operate on reason. If he decided to take offense at your words. But he didn't. She looked up at him, still shaking, but also feeling a strange sense of triumph. I saved Silver Ridge Cole. He was planning to raid the town, and I talked him out of it. This time. His voice was rough. What about next time, Evelyn, you can't? He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Then, to her utter shock, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I was terrified, he said into her hair. When you told me you'd faced Reeves alone, I wanted to... He broke off, pulling back just enough to look at her face. I can't lose you. I know I have no right to say that we're just friends, that you have your own life to live. But the truth is, Evelyn Hart, I'm falling in love with you. Have been falling in love with you since the day you pointed a gun at me on that road. And the thought of anything happening to you. Cole, she whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. You don't have to say anything. I know this complicates things. I know you came here for independence, not for a relationship with a rancher who can't help but worry about you every moment you're out of his sight. He touched her face gently. But I needed you to know. I needed you to understand why I'm asking, begging you to be more careful. Not because I think you're incapable, but because you matter to me. More than I've ever let anyone matter. Evelyn felt something fundamental shift inside her. All the walls she'd carefully constructed, all her determination to remain independent and unattached, they crumbled in the face of his honest emotion and her own undeniable feelings. I love you too, she heard herself say, and the relief on his face was so profound it made her heart ache. I've been fighting it, trying to convince myself I came here for other reasons. But the truth is, you've become the best part of my days. When you're not here, I miss you. When you are, I feel more myself than I've ever felt. You don't diminish my independence, Cole. You enhance it by being someone who respects it. Then accept my protection, he said quietly. Not because you need it, but because you're allowing me to care for someone I love. There's a difference. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll be more careful. I'll accept escorts. He kissed her. Then a kiss that was both gentle and desperate, full of relief and promise, and things too deep for words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn felt as if the entire world had shifted on its axis. We should tell the sheriff about Reeves, Cole said, finally still holding her close. Yes, Evelyn agreed. But Cole, yes. Thank you for not treating me like I'm fragile, for understanding that I can be both independent and in love, both capable and willing to accept help. He smiled that slow, genuine smile she'd come to treasure. Thank you for letting me love you, Evelyn Hart. That's the greatest gift you could give me. As they walked together toward the sheriff's office to report the encounter, Evelyn realized something profound. She'd come west, seeking independence and purpose, convinced that love would compromise those goals. But with Cole, she'd found something deeper, a partnership that honored both her strength and her vulnerability, a relationship built on respect and genuine understanding. She'd found quite simply home, The sheriff's office smelled of tobacco smoke and old coffee. Sheriff Dawson listened to Evelyn's account with a grim expression, his weathered fingers drumming on the desk as she described every detail of her encounter with Reeves. "You were lucky, Miss Hart," he said when she finished. "Damn lucky, pardon my language. Reeves doesn't usually respond well to being challenged." "She was also smart." Cole interjected, his hand resting protectively on the back of Evelyn's chair. She read him correctly, knew exactly what to say to make retreat seem like his idea rather than hers. Dawson nodded slowly. "Maybe so. But it doesn't change the fact that he's still out there and now he knows Silver Ridge is defended. That might make him cautious, or it might make him angry." He looked directly at Evelyn. "You need to be careful, miss. Real careful. Men like Reeves have long memories and don't like being outmaneuvered, especially by women." "I understand," Evelyn said quietly. After they left the sheriff's office, Cole walked her back to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. The evening had grown cool, autumn's chill settling over the town like a warning. At the front steps, he turned to face her, his expression serious in the lamplight spilling from the windows. "I meant what I said earlier, he told her. "Every word." "I know, so did I." Evelyn hesitated, then added, "But, Cole, we need to be practical about this. I have my teaching position, my responsibilities to the town. You have your ranch. We can't just—" "I'm not asking you to abandon anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm asking for the chance to court you properly, to see where this might lead. No pressure, no demands, just honest exploration of what we might build together." Courting. Evelyn tested the word, found it both old-fashioned and oddly fitting. "You want to court me?" "With your permission, yes." He smiled slightly. "I know it's not very progressive. My mother would probably tell me I should be more modern in my approach. But I was raised to believe that when you care about someone, you do things properly. You show respect. You take your time. You build something solid." Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest. "Your mother was wise. And yes, Cole Barrington, you have my permission to court me." He took her hand, brought it to his lips in a gesture that should have seemed theatrical, but instead felt perfect. "Then I'll do my best to be worthy of the privilege." The next morning, the entire town of Silver Ridge knew that Cole Barrington was courting Miss Hart, the schoolteacher. Mrs. Patterson had witnessed their goodbye from her parlor window and had promptly shared the news with everyone she encountered. By the time Evelyn arrived at the schoolhouse, even her students were buzzing with excitement. "Miss Hart, is it true Mr. Barrington is your beau?" Emma Patterson asked, her eyes wide with romantic interest. "Mr. Barrington and I are courting." "Yes," Evelyn replied, trying to maintain her professional demeanor despite the warmth in her cheeks. "Now let's focus on today's lesson. We're going to discuss metaphor and poetry." But even as she taught, part of her mind was occupied with the reality of what she'd agreed to. Courting Cole meant opening herself to possibility, to the chance that her carefully planned independent life might evolve into something different. It meant risk vulnerability, the potential for hurt. It also meant joy partnership and a connection deeper than any she'd experienced. Over the following weeks, Cole courted her with a combination of old-fashioned romance and genuine respect for her autonomy. He brought flowers from his ranch's late-blooming garden. He attended her evening classes for adults participating in discussions and showing that education was valuable at any age. He brought books for her students, supplies for the schoolhouse, and his steady, reliable presence. But he also gave her space. He didn't crowd her or make demands. When she needed to focus on preparing lessons or working with struggling students, he understood. When she wanted to spend evenings alone with her thoughts and her books, he didn't take offense. He courted her without trying to possess her, loved her without diminishing her independence. "You're different when he's around," Mrs. Patterson observed one evening as they sat in the boarding house parlor, Evelyn grading papers, while the older woman mended linens. "Different how?" Evelyn asked, looking up from a student's essay on westward expansion. "Softer, happier." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Don't misunderstand me, dear. You've always been wonderful, strong, capable, determined. But with Cole, you allow yourself to simply be. You don't feel like you have to prove anything." Evelyn set down her pen, considering this. "I spent so much of my life in Boston feeling like I had to justify my existence. Justify why I wanted education, why I didn't want to just marry and fade into domesticity, why my thoughts and opinions mattered. She looked out the window at the darkening street. With Cole, I don't have to justify anything. He simply accepts that I matter, that I have value beyond what I can provide for someone else. That's how love should be.
This story was
Mrs.
posted
Patterson
on the
said
channel
quietly.
west of Betrayal.
My late husband
Please do
was
not
the same way.
repost it in any
He never
form.
tried to make me smaller so he could feel bigger. We built a life together where both of us could flourish. Did you ever regret it, marriage, I mean? Giving up independence? Oh, my dear. Mrs. Patterson set down her mending and looked at Evelyn with kind, knowing eyes. I never gave up independence by marrying John. I gained a partner. There's a profound difference between being dominated and being in partnership. One diminishes you. The other multiplies what you're capable of achieving. Those words stayed with Evelyn as October deepened into November, and the Montana landscape transformed into stark beauty. Golden grasses, mountains dusted with early snow skies, so blue they seemed almost artificial. Her relationship with Cole deepened in parallel with the changing season, becoming something fundamental to who she was becoming. He taught her to ride better, to read the weather signs that veterans of the frontier understood instinctively, to appreciate the harsh beauty of this land that was now her home. She shared with him her love of literature, her educational philosophies, her dreams of expanding the school into something that could serve the entire community year-round. You're thinking bigger than just a schoolhouse, Cole observed one Sunday afternoon as they rode out to see the valley where his cattle grazed. You're thinking about transformation. Is that too ambitious? Evelyn asked. No. He smiled at her across the space between their horses. Ambition is what built this territory. People who were willing to dream big and work hard to make those dreams real. You're doing the same thing, just with education instead of land or cattle. Some people think I'm too bold. I overheard Mrs. Chen at the general store saying I should focus on teaching reading and writing, not filling children's heads with ideas above their station. Cole's expression darkened. And what's wrong with ideas? What's wrong with challenging people to think beyond the circumstances they were born into? Nothing, in my opinion, but not everyone shares that view. Then not everyone matters. He said it flatly with absolute conviction. Evelyn, you're doing something important here. You're giving people tools to shape their own destinies. That threatens some folks because it disrupts the comfortable hierarchies they've built. But that's exactly why it's necessary. She loved him for that, for understanding not just what she was doing, but why it mattered, for being willing to defend her vision even when others criticized it. The first snow came in mid-November, a light dusting that transformed Silver Ridge into something magical. Evelyn stood at her schoolhouse window, watching the flakes fall, thinking about how much her life had changed in just a few months. She'd come west expecting isolation, expecting to pour all her energy into teaching while building a solitary but meaningful existence. Instead, she'd found community purpose and love. The sound of the door opening made her turn. Cole entered carrying a large basket, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. Maria sent lunch, he explained, setting the basket on her desk. She insisted you need to eat more, that you're working too hard. Maria worries too much, Evelyn said, but she was touched by the gesture. Cole's housekeeper had taken a motherly interest in her, always sending food and practical gifts. She cares about you, so do I. Cole brushed snow from his coat. Actually, I came to ask you something. My ranch foreman, Sam, and his wife are celebrating their 30th anniversary next week. We're having a gathering at the ranch. Nothing fancy, just food and music and good company. I'd like you to come, to be there with me officially as the woman I'm courting. Evelyn felt a flutter of nervousness. Meeting his ranch community as his acknowledged sweetheart felt like a significant step, a public declaration that would further entwine their lives. Yes, she said, before caution could override desire. I'd be honored. The gathering was everything Cole had promised and more. The Double B Ranch House was transformed with lanterns and decorations, the large main room cleared for dancing tables laden with food prepared by every ranch family in the area. Sam and his wife Rosa beamed with happiness as their community celebrated their long marriage. Cole introduced Evelyn to everyone, his ranch hands and their families, neighboring ranchers, townspeople who'd made the journey out. He did so with obvious pride, his hand at the small of her back, his manner making it clear that she was important to him. Special. "So you're the teacher who's got our Cole all turned around," one weathered rancher said with a grin. "Never thought I'd see the day. He's been married to this ranch for so long we figured he'd stay a bachelor forever." "The right woman has a way of changing a man's mind," Cole replied easily, looking at Evelyn with warmth in his gray eyes. Later, when someone brought out a fiddle and the dancing began, Cole pulled her into his arms for a waltz. Evelyn had learned to dance in Boston's formal ballrooms, but this was different, less structured, more joyful, with couples of all ages swirling around the room. "Happy?" Cole asked as they moved together. "Very," Evelyn admitted. "Your people are wonderful, and this ranch, I can see why it means so much to you." "It's home," he said simply. "But lately I've realized that home isn't just a place. It's people, too. Specific people who make you feel like you belong." She understood what he was saying, what he was implying, that she was becoming his home as much as the ranch was. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it felt right. Natural. Like something that had always been meant to happen. They stayed late, helping clean up after most guests had departed. Rosa hugged Evelyn goodbye with tears in her eyes. "You're good for him," she said quietly. "I've known Cole since he was a boy. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you're something precious he's afraid to break but determined to cherish." "He's good for me too," Evelyn replied honestly. The ride back to Silver Ridge was cold but beautiful, with stars brilliant in the clear night sky. Cole had insisted on escorting her despite the late hour, and she was grateful for his presence as they rode through the silent landscape. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said as they neared town. "I know it was a big step meeting everyone as my—" "Your sweetheart," Evelyn supplied, using the old-fashioned term with deliberate playfulness. "I was going to say the woman I love, but sweetheart works too," he smiled, "though I prefer to be more direct about my feelings. I've noticed that about you. You don't hide what you think or feel. Life's too short for games, especially out here." His expression grew more serious. "Evelyn, I know we're taking things slowly, getting to know each other properly, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I'm not courting you for entertainment or companionship. I'm courting you because I see a future with you, a real future." Her heart raced. "What kind of future? The kind where you keep teaching, keep changing lives, keep being exactly who you are, but you do it as my wife, as my partner. Where we build something together, your educational vision and my ranch combined into something neither of us could achieve alone." He paused. "I'm not proposing yet. It's too soon and I want to do this right. But I need you to know where my heart is heading." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, processing the enormity of what he'd just shared. Then she said softly, "My heart is heading in the same direction." The look of pure joy on his face made her breath catch. He reined in his horse, reached across to cup her face, and kissed her with a tenderness that spoke of promises and possibilities. "I'll make you happy," he murmured against her lips. "I swear I'll spend every day trying to make you happy." "You already do," she whispered back. They arrived at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house to find the older woman waiting up, a knowing smile on her face when she saw their expressions. "Good evening, was it?" she asked innocently. "The best," Evelyn replied, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn allowed herself to fully imagine the future Cole had described. Teaching, yes, but as part of a larger vision. A partnership with a man who respected her intelligence and ambition. A life that honored both her need for purpose and her capacity for love. It was everything she'd thought she didn't want reimagined into something she couldn't resist. The illusion of peace shattered 3 days later. Evelyn was in the middle of teaching a mathematics lesson when they heard the gunshots, sharp cracks that echoed through the cold afternoon air, followed by shouting. Every student froze, eyes wide with fear. "Under your desks," Evelyn commanded, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Now, stay quiet." The children obeyed instantly, even the older boys like Jack Morrison, who usually resisted authority. Evelyn moved to the window, careful to stay to the side where she couldn't be easily seen from outside. More gunshots, screaming, the thunder of hooves, her stomach clenched with recognition. This wasn't random violence. This was organized, deliberate. "Reeves." Through the window, she saw chaos unfolding on Silver Ridge's main street. Men on horseback were ransacking the general store, throwing goods into saddlebags, while the owner lay motionless on the ground outside his own shop. His wife knelt
This
beside
story
him,
was
screaming
posted
for
on the
help.
channel West
Sheriff
of Betrayal.
Dawson emerged from
Please
his
do not
office, gun
repost
drawn
it
only
in
to
any
be driven
form.
back by a hail of bullets. The man with the scar, Reeves, sat his horse in the center of the street like a commander surveying a battlefield, directing his men with calm efficiency. "Miss Hart," Emma Patterson's frightened whisper came from beneath her desk. "What's happening? Stay down and stay quiet." Evelyn repeated, her mind racing. The schoolhouse was on the edge of town, not directly in the path of the raid, but visible from the main street. Would Reeves remember her? Would he come here? She moved quickly, locking the door and pulling down the window shades. Then she retrieved her revolver from her desk drawer. She'd started carrying it regularly after her encounter with Reeves, and positioned herself where she could see the door while remaining hidden from outside view. The minutes stretched endlessly. More gunshots, breaking glass, the sound of horses moving past the schoolhouse. Evelyn kept her revolver steady, praying that none of the children would panic, that Reeves and his men would take what they wanted and leave. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, the sounds of violence faded. Hoofbeats receded. Silence fell, broken only by distant shouting and the sobbing of someone in pain. Evelyn waited another 5 minutes before cautiously approaching the window. The main street was littered with debris, broken crates, scattered goods, shattered glass. People were emerging from buildings, rushing to help the wounded. The general store owner was being carried inside, somewhere his wife following with her apron pressed against his bleeding shoulder. "Children," Evelyn said, keeping her voice calm and authoritative. "The danger has passed. We're going to exit carefully and return to your homes. Stay together, stay calm. Parents, if you're able, please come to the schoolhouse to collect your children." She sent Jack Morrison to spread the word, and within minutes parents were arriving, some armed, all frightened, everyone grateful that the schoolhouse had been spared. As students were reunited with families, Evelyn learned the full extent of the damage. The general store had been the primary target. Mr. Chen, the owner, had been shot when he tried to resist. His injury was serious, but not fatal. The bullet had gone through his shoulder, missing vital organs. Reeves and his gang had taken supplies, money, weapons, everything of value they could carry. The sheriff and his deputies had tried to stop them, but were outgunned and driven back. By the time the last student had been collected, Cole was riding hard into town, his face tight with fear and fury. "Evelyn." He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped pulling her into his arms. "Thank God. When I heard about the raid, I thought, 'We're fine,'" she assured him, though she was shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "The children are safe. The schoolhouse wasn't touched." "Reeves." "I saw him. He was leading them." Cole's jaw clenched. "The sheriff's organizing a posse. We're going after them immediately while the trail is still fresh." Fear clutched at Evelyn's heart. "Cole, no. It's too dangerous. Reeves has at least 6 men, maybe more. They're armed. And they just shot an innocent man and terrorized our town." Cole interrupted, his voice hard. "We can't let them get away with this, Evelyn. If we don't stop them now, they'll just come back, maybe hit another town, maybe hurt more people." "I know, but I have to go." He cupped her face gently, his gray eyes intense. "I have to do this. It's my responsibility as part of this community, but I need you to promise me you'll stay safe. Stay with Mrs. Patterson. Lock the doors. Don't go out alone." "I promise," she whispered, though every instinct screamed at her to beg
This
him to
story
stay.
was posted on the
"Please be
channel
careful."
West of Betrayal.
"I will."
Please do not
He kissed
repost
her
it in
forehead,
any
then her
form.
lips. "I love you, Evelyn Hart. Remember that." "I love you too. Come back to me." "Always," he promised. She watched him ride away with the posse, 15 men heavily armed, grim-faced. Sheriff Dawson led them with Cole and several other experienced ranchers flanking him. They disappeared up the mountain trail where Reeves had fled, and Evelyn felt as if part of her heart had ridden away with them. The waiting was agony. That first night, Evelyn stayed with the Chen family, helping Mrs. Chen tend to her husband's wound while their children huddled nearby, frightened and traumatized. Mr. Chen drifted in and out of consciousness, feverish from blood loss and shock. The Dr. Silver Ridge's only physician, an elderly man named Dr. Morrison, worked tirelessly to stabilize him. He'll live, Dr. Morrison said, finally wiping blood from his hands. The bullet went clean through and I've stopped the bleeding, but he'll need careful nursing for the next week. Infection is the danger now. Mrs. Chen dissolved into tears of relief. Evelyn held her, letting the woman cry against her shoulder while making soothing sounds and promises that everything would be all right. But would it? Would anything be all right until Reeves was caught? Until Cole returned safely. The second day brought no news. The posse had been gone for more than 24 hours with no word. Evelyn tried to maintain normalcy, teaching her classes despite the distraction conducting evening lessons for adults who desperately needed the escape of learning. But her mind was elsewhere, tracking imagined scenarios of what might be happening in the mountains. They'll find him, Mrs. Patterson said that evening as they sat in the parlor, Evelyn's hands trembling too much to hold her teacup steady. Cole is smart and experienced. He'll be careful. Reeves is smart too, Evelyn replied, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. And he's ruthless. He doesn't care about fair fights or honorable combat. He cares about winning. Then we have to trust that our men are equally determined. The third day dawned gray and cold with clouds pressing low over the mountains. Evelyn taught mechanically, her attention divided between her students and the window watching for riders. By afternoon, when still no news had come, she found herself struggling to breathe properly, panic rising in her chest. She was helping Jack Morrison with a writing assignment when Emma suddenly called out, "Miss Hartrider's coming." Evelyn rushed to the window, her heart in her throat. A group of men were approaching town, their horses moving slowly, wearily. She counted them frantically, 12, 13, 14, 15. All 15 men who'd ridden out, but several were clearly injured, slumped in their saddles or being supported by others. And at the center of the group, unmistakable even from a distance, was Cole alive, sitting upright, but with what looked like blood on his shirt and a bandage visible on his left arm. "Class dismissed," Evelyn said abruptly. "Go straight home. Tell your parents the posse has returned." She didn't wait for acknowledgement, didn't bother with proper procedure. She simply ran her skirts bunched in her hands, racing toward the incoming riders with her heart threatening to burst from her chest. Cole saw her coming and managed a tired smile despite his obvious exhaustion and pain. He dismounted carefully, favoring his left side, and she crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him and not caring who saw who, judged who disapproved. "You're alive," she gasped against his chest. "You're hurt, but you're alive." "I'm all right," he assured her, though his voice was rough with fatigue. "It's just a graze. Looks worse than it is." "What happened?" She pulled back just enough to examine him properly. The bandage on his arm was blood-soaked, and she could see bruising on his face, a cut above his eye. "Did you catch them?" "We tracked them to their hideout in the high country," Sheriff Dawson answered, dismounting nearby. "There was a fight. We got 3 of them wounded, 2 more. But Reeves..." His expression darkened. "Reeves got away. He's on foot. His horse was killed, but he disappeared into the mountain canyons. We searched for 2 days, but lost his trail." Evelyn felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "So he's still out there?" "Yes, but he's alone now without his gang, without supplies. Winter's coming." Dawson shook his head. "He might make it out of the territory, or he might freeze to death in the mountains. Either way, he won't be threatening Silver Ridge again anytime soon." "Come on," Evelyn said, taking Cole's good arm. "Let's get you to the doctor. That wound needs proper attention." Dr. Morrison cleaned and rebandaged Cole's arm while Evelyn sat nearby, refusing to leave despite the doctor's suggestions that she might prefer to wait outside. "The bullet grazed you," Dr. Morrison explained as he worked. "Another inch to the left and it would have hit the bone. You were lucky, Cole." "I was careful," Cole corrected. "And I had something to come home to." His eyes found Evelyn's, and the emotion in them made her throat tight with unshed tears. After the doctor finished, after Cole had been given food and water and a place to rest, Evelyn finally let herself fully process what had happened. The man she loved had ridden into danger, had been shot, had spent days hunting a ruthless outlaw through dangerous terrain. He'd risked everything because it was right, because his community needed him, because that's who he was, and he'd come back to her. That evening, when he was strong enough to walk, They found a quiet spot on the church steps, away from the celebratory gathering in the street, where townspeople
This
were
story was
praising the
posted
returned
on the
posse.
channel west of
I
Betrayal.
was terrified,
Please do not
Evelyn
repost it
admitted,
in any
sitting close
form.
beside him. Every moment you were gone, I imagined the worst. I tried to stay busy to focus on my students, but all I could think about was that you might not come back. I'm sorry I worried you. Cole took her hand carefully, mindful of his injured arm. But I'd do it again. Evelyn, men like Reeves, they destroy communities. They hurt innocent people. They take what isn't theirs. Someone has to stand against that. I know, and I'm proud of you for doing it, but I'm also angry at you for risking yourself. She looked at him directly. Is that contradictory? No, it's human. He smiled slightly. When I was up in those mountains, when that bullet came close, all I could think about was you, about promises I'd made, about a future I desperately wanted to see. He paused, then said quietly, I almost proposed right then in my head. I thought if I die today, I'll die regretting that I didn't ask Evelyn Hart to marry me. Her breath caught. Colt, I'm not proposing now, he said quickly. Not like this when I'm exhausted and injured and probably not making complete sense. When I propose, and I will propose, Evelyn, make no mistake about that. I want to do it right. When we're both clear-headed and the world isn't falling apart around us. But you're saying, I'm saying that 3 days alone in the wilderness, tracking an outlaw and dodging bullets clarified something for me. He squeezed her hand gently. I want to spend my life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to support your teaching and watch you transform this community. I want children with your intelligence and spirit. I want to grow old with you on that ranch, watching the seasons change and the years pass, grateful every day that you pointed a gun at me on a dusty road. Tears were streaming down Evelyn's face now, but she didn't care. I want that too, she whispered. All of it. I came west thinking I wanted independence above everything else, that love would compromise my goals. But you've taught me that the right kind of love doesn't diminish independence, it enhances it, supports it, makes it possible in ways I never imagined. Then we're agreed. Cole asked, his gray eyes searching hers, about the direction we're heading, about what we're building together. Yes, Evelyn said firmly. We're agreed. He kissed her, then gentle because of his injuries, but no less passionate, no less full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn realized that the entire town could probably see them, that this public display was scandalous by Boston standards. She didn't care. Let them see. Let them know. This man, this brave, honorable, wonderful man was hers, and she was his. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In the distance, the Montana mountains rose dark against the evening sky, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Somewhere in those mountains, Reeves was likely still out there, wounded and alone but alive. The threat wasn't completely eliminated. But for tonight, in this moment with Cole beside her and love filling her heart, Evelyn felt only gratitude. Gratitude for the broken stagecoach wheel that had brought her to his ranch. Gratitude for her own courage in coming west. Gratitude for the series of chances and choices that had led her here, to this man, to this life that was so different from anything she'd planned, but so much richer than she'd dared to hope. Take me home, she said softly. Cole stood carefully, pulling her up with him. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. For now, Evelyn agreed. But someday soon home will mean something different, something we build together. I'm counting on it, Cole replied. And in his
This
smile,
story
she
was
saw their
posted on
entire
the channel
future,
west of
challenging the
Betrayal.
beautiful real.
Please do not repost it
They
in
walked
any
through
form.
Silver Ridge's darkening streets, hand in hand, two people who'd found in each other what they hadn't known they were searching for. Behind them, the town continued its celebration. Ahead, their future waited, uncertain but promising. And Evelyn Hart, the Boston schoolteacher who'd come west seeking independence, had found something infinitely better. She'd found partnership purpose and a love that honored every part of who she was while inviting her to become even more. She'd found home. The weeks following the raid transformed Silver Ridge in subtle but profound ways. The town had faced danger together, had seen its people stand up to protect what they'd built, and that shared experience created bonds that went deeper than mere neighborliness. People checked on each other more often. The evening gatherings at the Silver Spoon became larger and more frequent, and everyone, it seemed, wanted to talk about Cole Barrington and Miss Hart. They make a fine couple, Mrs. Patterson said one morning over breakfast, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. I knew from the moment I saw them together that first day, the way he looked at her like she was something rare and precious, and the way she tried so hard not to look back at him, which of course meant she already cared more than she wanted to admit. Evelyn felt her cheeks warm but couldn't suppress a smile. You're a romantic, Mrs. Patterson. I'm a realist who happens to believe in love, the older woman corrected. There's a difference. I've seen plenty of couples who married for practical reasons, land, money, convenience. Some of them were even happy in their way. But what you and Cole have, that's something different. That's the kind of partnership that weathers storms. The assessment proved accurate as autumn deepened into winter's approach. Cole's injury healed slowly but steadily, and through those weeks of recovery, Evelyn saw new dimensions of his character. He accepted help without complaint, showed patience when forced to rest instead of work, and used the time to read extensively from the books she brought him. They spent long afternoons at his ranch house, discussing everything from agricultural innovations to political philosophy, their conversations ranging across topics with the ease of two minds that genuinely enjoyed each other. "Read me something," Cole said one gray afternoon as they sat in his study, a fire crackling in the hearth. His arm was still in a sling, and Evelyn had ridden out with Sam as her escort to check on his progress. She selected a volume of Thoreau from his mother's collection and began reading passages from Walden, her voice filling the comfortable room with ideas about simplicity, nature, and living deliberately. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. She read, then paused. Do you think that's true? Cole considered this carefully. I think it can be true if people lose sight of what matters. If they spend their lives chasing things that don't fulfill them or living according to someone else's expectations. He looked at her intently. But I also think it doesn't have to be that way. Some people like you, refuse to accept quiet desperation. They choose to live deliberately, as Thoreau says, to build lives that matter. You do the same thing, Evelyn pointed out. You could have sold this ranch after your parents died, moved somewhere easier, lived off the proceeds. But you stayed. You built something meaningful. Because this place is part of who I am. He gestured toward the window where the rolling ranch land stretched toward distant mountains. My father broke this ground. My mother planted those trees by the house. Every fence post, every building, every decision about how to use the land, it's all part of a legacy I'm honored to continue. He paused, then added quietly, and I want to share that legacy with you, build on it together, create something that outlasts both of us. Evelyn set down the book, her heart full. You make it sound so simple. Isn't it? We love each other. We respect each other. We share values and vision. The rest is just details we'll figure out as we go. But the details mattered, and they spent considerable time discussing them. Cole made it clear he had no expectations that Evelyn would abandon her teaching to become simply a rancher's wife. Instead, he proposed something more radical, expanding her vision for education to include the entire region, using the ranch's resources to support programs that would benefit multiple communities. What if we built a proper school building on ranch land? He suggested one evening. Something larger than the current schoolhouse with room for more students, a library, maybe even boarding facilities for children from distant ranches who can't make the daily trip. You could continue teaching but have more resources, more support, more ability to implement your ideas. Evelyn's mind raced with possibilities. That would be extraordinary, but the cost is an investment in the future. Cole said it with such conviction that she knew he'd been thinking about this for some time. What's the point of building wealth if we don't use it for something meaningful? My parents would have loved this idea. Education was everything to them. You're serious about this? Completely serious. We can start planning it now, begin construction in the spring, have it ready by next fall. He took her hand. I want to support your work, Evelyn. Not just tolerate it or accommodate it, but actively help you achieve what you're capable of achieving. That's what partnership means to me. She kissed him then deeply and thoroughly, trying to convey through touch what words seemed inadequate to express. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole's eyes were dark with emotion. Keep kissing me like that, he said roughly, and I'll build you a dozen schools. She laughed, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. One will suffice, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. As Cole recovered fully and November slipped into December, their courtship took on new dimensions. He began appearing at the schoolhouse with surprising frequency, sometimes bringing supplies or books, sometimes simply watching from the back of the room as she taught. The children quickly grew accustomed to his presence, and some of the bolder students began asking him questions about ranching horses and frontier survival. "Mr. Barrington," Emma Patterson said one afternoon, her hand raised eagerly, "is it true you tracked outlaws through the mountains?" Cole glanced at Evelyn, who nodded permission. "It's true. The sheriff organized a posse and several ranchers, including me, joined to help track the men who'd raided our town." "Were you scared?" asked Thomas, the quiet boy who rarely spoke. "Yes," Cole answered honestly. Being scared is natural when facing danger, but being scared doesn't mean you can't act. It means you acknowledge the risk and choose to do what's right anyway. That's what courage really is, not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Jack Morrison, who'd become one of Evelyn's most improved students, leaned forward. "My pa says fear makes you weak." "Your father is wrong," Cole said bluntly but kindly. "Fear's information. It tells you something is dangerous so you can prepare properly." The men in that posse who claimed they weren't afraid, they were either lying or foolish. The rest of us admitted our fear and worked together to stay safe while doing our duty. Evelyn watched this exchange with warmth spreading through her chest. Cole wasn't just tolerating her work, he was actively participating in it, showing her students that strength could coexist with vulnerability, that real men didn't need to pretend invincibility. After the children left that afternoon, Cole stayed to help her tidy the schoolroom. "You're good with them," Evelyn observed, stacking slates. "Natural teacher yourself." "I'm just honest." Children deserve honesty. They can tell when adults are patronizing them or feeding them comfortable lies. He straightened desks with his now healed arm. "Besides, I figure if I'm going to be part of your life, I should understand this part of it. Not just observe from a distance, but really engage with what you do. Most men wouldn't bother. Most men are fools." He said it matter-of-factly. "You're brilliant at this, Evelyn. Watching you work, seeing how you challenge students while making them feel safe to try and fail, it's remarkable. I want to understand it, appreciate it, support it." She crossed to him, standing close. "You make me feel seen in a way no one else ever has. Not just tolerated or admired from afar, but truly seen and valued for exactly who I am." "That's because you're extraordinary," Cole said simply. "And I'd be a fool not to recognize it." December brought the first heavy snowfall, transforming the Montana landscape into something ethereal and beautiful. Evelyn had experienced Boston winters, of course, but there was something different about winter in the West, the way the snow made the vast emptiness seem even more vast, the brilliant clarity of the air, the absolute silence that fell over the land at night. Cole had invited her to spend Sunday at the ranch with Mrs. Patterson coming along as chaperone to maintain propriety. They arrived mid-morning to find the ranch transformed by fresh snow, everything white and pristine except where ranch hands had cleared paths between buildings. "Come with me," Cole said after lunch, his eyes bright with something that looked like barely contained excitement. "I want to show you something." They bundled into warm coats and rode out, Mrs. Patterson staying behind by the fire with Maria and a book. The cold was sharp but exhilarating, and Evelyn found herself laughing as Daisy picked her way carefully through the snow. Cole led her to a valley she'd never seen before, about 2 miles from the main ranch house. It was sheltered on 3 sides by gentle rises with a frozen stream cutting through the center and stands of pine providing windbreaks.
This story was
And
posted
there in the
on the
middle of this
channel west
protected
of the
valley
trail.
was evidence
Please
of
do not
recent
repost
construction
it in any
foundation
form.
stones laid timber stacked and waiting the clear outline of a substantial building taking shape. Evelyn's breath caught. "What is this?" Cole dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "It's our home. Or it will be if you agree to marry me." Her heart stuttered. "Cole, I know I said I'd wait to propose properly," he interrupted, talking faster now as if afraid she might stop him. "I know this isn't candlelight and roses and romantic speeches, but Evelyn, I can't wait anymore. These past months have shown me what life could be with you, and I want that life. I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to watch you transform education in this territory while I support you in every possible way. I want children with your courage and intelligence. I want to grow old with you in this valley in a home we build together from nothing. He pulled off his glove and reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. When he opened it, Evelyn saw a ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, the blue stone catching the winter sunlight like captured sky. "This was my grandmother's," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "My mother's mother. She wore it for 60 years of marriage to a man who adored her. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to a woman who was worthy of that legacy. A woman of substance and spirit and courage." He knelt in the snow, looking up at her with those gray eyes she'd come to love so deeply. "Evelyn Hart, you're not like other women I've known. You're braver, smarter, more determined to make a difference in the world. You're exactly what I didn't know I was searching for. Will you marry me? Will you build this life with me in this valley and let me spend every day trying to be worthy of you?" Tears were freezing on Evelyn's cheeks, but she didn't care. Her heart felt too large for her chest full of emotion she couldn't begin to articulate. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Cole Barrington, I'll marry you. I'll build a life with you. I'll—" He stood and kissed her before she could finish pulling her close and lifting her slightly off the ground. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at once, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire glowing against her skin like a promise. "I love you," he said fiercely. "I'll love you until the day I die, and probably long after that." "I love you too," Evelyn replied, touching his face with wonder. "You've changed everything I thought I wanted, shown me that independence and partnership aren't opposites. You've made me believe in possibilities I dismissed as impossible." They stood in the snow-covered valley, surrounded by the bones of their future home, and kissed again with all the passion and promise two people could share. When they finally pulled apart, Cole gestured to the foundation. "I started planning this the week after you arrived in Silver Ridge," he admitted. "I know that sounds presumptuous, but I couldn't help myself. I kept imagining you here, imagining us here. The house will have a library for all your books, a study where you can prepare lessons, large rooms for the children will have. And here," he pointed to a spot near the front where the porch would be. "Here we'll put chairs so we can sit together in the evenings and watch the sun set over the mountains." "It's perfect," Evelyn whispered. "All of it." They rode back to the ranch house to share the news, finding Mrs. Patterson, Maria, and Sam all waiting with barely concealed anticipation. The moment they saw Evelyn's face radiant with joy and the ring on her finger, celebration erupted. "Finally," Mrs. Patterson declared, hugging Evelyn tightly. "I was beginning to think he'd never ask." "I was building up courage," Cole protested, but he was grinning. "Congratulations, boss," Sam said, shaking Cole's hand firmly. "She's too good for you, but you're smart enough to know it." "I absolutely am," Cole agreed, pulling Evelyn close. "Too good for me and still somehow willing to take me on." That evening, back in Silver Ridge, the news spread like wildfire. By the time Evelyn and Mrs. Patterson returned to the boarding house, half the town seemed to know that Miss Hart and Mr. Barrington were engaged. Well-wishers stopped by throughout the evening, bringing congratulations and advice, sharing stories of their own courtships and marriages, welcoming Evelyn more fully into the community's embrace. "When's the wedding?" Madame Dubois asked when she arrived with a bottle of wine. "Please tell me you're not waiting until spring. That's months away, and we could all use something to celebrate this winter." Evelyn looked at Cole, who'd stayed for the impromptu gathering. They hadn't discussed timing yet, had been too caught up in the emotion of the moment. "What do you think?" Cole asked. "I'm ready to marry you tomorrow if you're willing, but I also want you to have the wedding you deserve." "I don't need elaborate," Evelyn said slowly, thinking it through. "I just need meaningful. Something that reflects who we are and what we're building together." "Then let's do it in January, Shah," Cole suggested. "After the new year, that gives us a month to plan something simple but special." "What do you say about January?" Evelyn repeated, testing how it felt. A winter wedding in Montana territory, so different from the elaborate society affairs she'd witnessed in Boston. But this would be authentic, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them rather than social obligation. "Yes, January feels right." The next month passed in a flurry of activity that kept Evelyn busy enough to prevent excessive nervousness. She continued teaching. Of course, her students were too important to neglect, but evenings and weekends were devoted to wedding preparations. Mrs. Patterson took charge of organizing the reception, recruiting women from throughout Silver Ridge to contribute food and decorations. Madame Dubois insisted on baking the cake herself, promising something spectacular. The church ladies formed a committee to transform the simple church into something worthy of the occasion. And through it all, Cole was a steady, supportive presence. He attended every planning meeting without complaint, deferred to Evelyn's preferences on everything, and somehow managed to make even the tedious details feel important because they were building this together. "What about your dress?" Mrs. Patterson asked one evening as they reviewed lists. "Have you thought about what you'll wear?" Evelyn had brought one nice dress from Boston, a deep green silk that she'd worn to important occasions, but it didn't feel quite right for a wedding. "I'm not sure. I don't want to spend money on something elaborate that I'll never wear again, but I also want to look beautiful," Cole interrupted, entering the parlor. "Which you will regardless of what you wear, but I might have a solution." He held up a carefully wrapped package. "My mother's wedding dress. Maria found it in a trunk in the attic. She thinks it might fit you or could be altered easily enough." Evelyn unwrapped the package with reverent hands, finding ivory silk inside, beautifully preserved despite the years. The dress was elegant but not overly ornate, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, simple lines that would suit any figure. She held it up against herself, and Mrs. Patterson gasped. "It's perfect," the older woman declared, "like it was made for you." "Try it on," Cole urged. "If it doesn't fit or you don't like it, we'll find something else. But I thought—" He paused, emotion flickering across his face. "I thought my mother would have liked knowing her dress was worn by the woman I love, that her legacy continues in that way." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I'm honored, truly honored. Let me try it." The dress fit with only minor alterations needed at the waist, and when Evelyn looked at herself in Mrs. Patterson's mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like someone from a different time, someone connected to history and tradition while still moving forward into an unknown future. "You look like a bride," Mrs. Patterson said softly. "Cole's bride." Christmas came and went with subdued celebration. The shadow of the recent raid still hung over Silver Ridge, making elaborate festivities feel inappropriate. But there was joy nonetheless, particularly among Evelyn's students who were thrilled that their teacher was getting married. "Will you stop teaching after you're married?" Emma asked anxiously during the last class before Christmas break. "Absolutely not," Evelyn assured her. "I'll keep teaching, keep working with all of you. Marriage doesn't mean abandoning the work I love. It means having a partner who supports that work and helps me do it even better." "My ma says married ladies don't work," Jack Morrison commented, but his tone was curious rather than challenging. "Some married ladies choose not to work outside the home, and that's a perfectly valid choice," Evelyn explained. "But other married ladies choose differently. The important thing is that women should have the choice, the freedom to decide what's right for their own lives. That's part of what education gives you options. The ability to choose your own path." Cole, who'd been listening from his usual spot at the back of the room, smiled with obvious pride. After the students left, he approached her desk. "You're going to change the world," he said seriously. "One student at a time, one mind at a time. And I'm going to be right beside you, cheering you on and helping however I can." "Even when it's difficult?" Evelyn asked. "Even when people criticize or resist, especially then?"
This
He took
story
her
was
hand, the
posted on the
engagement
channel
ring
west
catching
of
the winter
Betrayal.
light.
Please
That's what
do not
partnership
repost
means,
it in
Evelyn.
any form.
Not just celebrating the easy victories, but standing together through the hard fights. The week before the wedding brought unexpected challenges. A massive snowstorm rolled through paralyzing Silver Ridge for 3 days, and making everyone worry that guests from distant ranches wouldn't be able to attend. The church roof developed a leak that required emergency repairs. And 2 days before the ceremony, Evelyn came down with a fierce cold that left her feverish and exhausted. "We can postpone," Cole said, sitting beside her bed in Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "Your health is more important than any schedule." "No," Evelyn croaked, her voice rough from coughing. "I'm marrying you on January 15th as planned. I'll be fine by then." "You're stubborn," he observed fondly. You knew that when you proposed. I did. He kissed her forehead gently. It's one of the things I love most about you. But please rest. Let people take care of you for once. She did rest reluctantly while Mrs. Patterson and Maria took over final preparations. And miraculously, by the morning of her wedding day, Evelyn woke feeling weak but clear-headed, the fever broken during the night. I told you, she said to Mrs. Patterson, who'd been hovering anxiously. I told you I'd be fine. You're a force of nature, the older woman replied, shaking her head in amazement. Now, let's get you ready to marry that man before he wears a path in the church floor with his pacing. Getting ready felt surreal, like stepping into a dream. Maria helped her into the wedding dress, arranging her dark hair with simple elegance, adding a touch of color to her still pale cheeks. Mrs. Patterson produced a small bouquet of preserved flowers, dried roses, and lavender from summer carefully stored for this moment, and tied them with ivory ribbon. You look beautiful, Maria said, tears in her eyes. Like an angel. The bossy is going to cry when he sees you. Cole doesn't cry, Evelyn protested. Today he will Maria insisted with absolute certainty. The walk to the church felt both too long and too short. Silver Ridge had transformed despite the snow and cold. The main street was decorated with pine boughs and ribbons people had gathered outside the church, despite the January chill, and when Evelyn approached on Mrs. Patterson's arm, her father being too far away in Boston to attend, she heard spontaneous applause. Inside the church was packed with everyone who'd become important in her Montana life. Her students sat in the front rows, scrubbed and dressed in their best clothes. Tom Sullivan was there with his wife, the words she'd taught him, allowing him to read the Bible for his family now. The Chen family attended despite Mr. Chen's still healing shoulder, grateful for Evelyn's care during his recovery. Sam and Rosa sat with other ranch hands, their weathered faces soft with emotion. And at the front, beside the circuit preacher who'd ridden in especially for the ceremony, stood Cole Barrington. He wore a dark suit that made him look both formal and slightly uncomfortable. His dark hair carefully combed his face, clean-shaven. But it was his expression that made Evelyn's breath catch. He looked at her as if she were the sun breaking through winter clouds, as if she were the answer to every prayer he'd never voiced, as if she were exactly what his heart had been searching for without knowing it. Maria had been right. There were tears in his eyes. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Evelyn heard herself making vows to love, honor, and cherish, to stand beside Cole through joy and hardship, to build a life together that honored both their individual dreams and their shared vision. She heard Cole's voice steady and sure, promising to support her work, respect her independence, and love her with everything he had until his last breath and beyond. She felt him slide a simple gold band onto her finger, joining his grandmother's sapphire. She felt her own hands tremble as she placed a matching band on his finger. And then the preacher was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Cole was kissing her with a tenderness that somehow conveyed both passion and reverence, and the church erupted in cheers and applause. Mrs. Barrington, Cole whispered against her lips, testing the name. I'm keeping Hart professionally, Evelyn replied, but she was smiling. But yes, Mrs. Barrington in my personal life, Evelyn Hart Barrington. Perfect, he said. You're perfect. The reception was held in the largest barn in Silver Ridge, transformed by the community into something magical. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over tables laden with food. Someone had brought a fiddle, someone else a guitar, and soon music filled the space. People ate and danced and celebrated with genuine joy, their spirits lifted by this reminder that life continued, that love flourished even in harsh circumstances. Cole danced with Evelyn for the first dance, then with Mrs. Patterson and Maria and Rosa, and even little Emma Patterson, who giggled delightedly at being treated like a grown-up lady. Evelyn danced with Sam and Dr. Morrison, and Tom Sullivan, who was so nervous about dancing that she had to count the steps allowed for him. You've made that cowboy very happy, Tom said gruffly as they moved through a simple waltz. And you've given this whole town something to believe in. You're good people, Miss Hart, Mrs. Barrington now, I suppose. Real good people. So are you, Tom? Evelyn replied warmly. You're proof that it's never too late to learn to grow to become more than you thought possible. As evening deepened, Cole found her standing by one of the barn windows, looking out at the snow-covered town. Tired? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. A little, but happy, So happy I can barely contain it. She leaned back against him, feeling his warmth, his solid strength. Is this real, Cole? Did we really just get married? We really did. He kissed the top of her head. You're mine now, Evelyn Hart Barrington, and I'm yours, for better or worse in sickness and health for all the years we're given. I like the sound of that. Good, because I plan on reminding you of it frequently. He turned her in his arms to face him. Are you ready to leave? I have one more surprise for you. Outside, a sleigh waited borrowed from one of the neighboring ranchers with blankets piled in the back and 2 strong horses harnessed to pull it. Cole helped Evelyn in tucking blankets around her against the cold, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They glided through the winter darkness, the sleigh's runners whispering over packed snow, the stars brilliant overhead. People came out of their homes to wave as they passed, calling congratulations and well wishes. Children ran alongside for a few steps before falling back laughing. And then they were beyond the town out on the open land with only the sound of the horse's breath and the runners on snow and the vast silence of Montana winter surrounding them. Where are we going? Evelyn asked, though she thought she knew. Home, Cole said simply. Our home. The valley appeared like something from a fairy tale transformed by snow and moonlight into something ethereal. But the house, their house, glowed with light from within. As they drew closer, Evelyn saw that it was finished, completed sometime in the weeks leading up to the wedding while she'd been distracted with preparations. You finished it, she breathed. Cole, you finished building our house. Sam and the boys worked day and night, he admitted, helping her down from the sleigh. We wanted you to have a real home to come to, not just a promise of one. Welcome home, Evelyn. He swept her into his arms before she could protest, carrying her over the threshold in the traditional way. Inside, fires burned in 2 fireplaces, casting dancing light over new furniture, polished wood floors, walls that smelled of fresh timber and hope. Maria and Mrs. Patterson came out earlier to set things up, Cole explained, setting Evelyn down gently. They stocked the kitchen, made up the bed, left food for tomorrow. Everything you need is here. Evelyn walked slowly through her new home, tears streaming down her face as she took in each careful detail. The library he'd promised already shelved and waiting for books. The study with a large desk and comfortable chair. The bedroom with its enormous bed and windows that would show the sunrise over the mountains. The kitchen with a modern stove and more counter space than she'd ever imagined. And everywhere touches that showed this was meant for them specifically. A bookshelf built to her exact height. A chair by the fire that was clearly sized for Cole's larger frame, but positioned next to a smaller one meant for her. Windows placed to capture the best light for reading. Space and design that anticipated their life together. You built this for us, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Every detail, every choice, you were thinking about our life together. I've been thinking about our life together since the day I met you, Cole admitted, pulling her close. Since you pointed a gun at me and told me you didn't need my help. I looked at you and thought, that's her. That's the woman I've been waiting for. I thought you were impossibly arrogant, Evelyn confessed, laughing through her tears. Riding up like some hero from a novel, acting like you could solve everything. And now I know you really can solve most things, but more importantly, you solve them with me, not for me. You made me see that accepting help isn't weakness, and that partnership enhances strength rather than diminishing it. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes serious in the firelight.
This story was posted on the channel
Evelyn
west
Hart
of
Barrington.
Betrayal.
I love
Please
your
do not
courage
repost it
and your
in any form.
intelligence and your determination to make the world better. I love how you challenge me and support me and see possibilities I'd never imagine on my own. I love everything you are and everything we'll become together. I love you too, Evelyn whispered, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. He kissed her then deeply and thoroughly, and she felt the last of her reservations dissolve. This was right. This was what she'd unknowingly been searching for when she left Boston, not just independence, but the freedom to choose her own path, including the freedom to choose partnership with a man who honored everything she was. Later, lying in their new bed with Cole's arms around her and the Montana darkness pressed soft against the windows, Evelyn felt peace settle over her like a benediction. She'd come west seeking purpose and found love, She'd expected solitude and discovered community. She'd thought marriage would limit her, but instead had found a partner who expanded every possibility. "What are you thinking?" Cole murmured, his lips against her hair. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Evelyn replied. "That every choice I made, every risk I took led me here. To you. To this life we're building together. No regrets. Not one." She turned in his arms to face him. "You know what my students asked me once? They asked if I regretted coming west, leaving everything familiar behind. And I realized that regret requires wishing things were different. But I don't wish anything was different, Cole. Not the broken stagecoach wheel that brought me to your ranch. Not the challenges or the dangers or the difficulties, because all of it led to this moment." "Then we've both been lucky," Cole said softly. "So incredibly lucky to find each other in this vast territory in this particular moment. What are the odds?" "The odds don't matter," Evelyn replied with certainty. "What matters is that we recognized what we'd found when we found it. That we were brave enough to reach for it, despite our fears and preconceptions." They talked long into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams, imagining the life they would build in this house, in this valley, in this territory that was becoming truly home. They talked about the school they would build together, the students they would teach, the community they would serve. They talked about children they might have someday, about growing old together, about leaving a legacy that mattered. And eventually they slept wrapped in each other's arms in their own home at the beginning of their shared journey. Outside, snow continued to fall softly over the Montana Valley, covering everything in pristine white, transforming the landscape into something new, while the land itself remained unchanged beneath enduring beautiful, full of possibility. Inside, by the dying embers of the fire, two people slept peacefully, their futures intertwined, their hearts committed to whatever adventures and challenges lay ahead. Evelyn Hart had come west alone, seeking independence and purpose. She'd found both, but she'd also found something richer and more complex, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. She'd found a man who saw her not as someone to possess, but as someone to stand beside. She'd found a community that valued her contributions. She'd found work that mattered deeply. Most importantly, she'd found home, not just a physical place, but a sense of belonging that came from being truly known and valued for exactly who she was. And as January turned toward February and winter began its slow transformation toward spring, Evelyn and Cole Barrington began their married life with confidence and joy, ready to face whatever came next together. The rhythm of married life established itself more quickly than Evelyn had anticipated. She woke each morning in Cole's arms, ate breakfast while discussing the day ahead, then rode to Silver Ridge to teach while he managed the ranch. Evenings they spent together planning the new school, reading aloud to each other, or simply talking about everything and nothing while the fire crackled and the Montana wind whispered outside their windows. "I never imagined domesticity could feel like this," Evelyn said one evening in late February as they sat together reviewing architectural plans for the expanded school. "I always thought marriage would be confining, limiting, but with you it feels like freedom multiplied." Cole looked up from the drawings, his gray eyes warm in the lamplight. "That's because we're building something together, rather than one of us sacrificing for the other. Your dreams are my dreams now, Evelyn. Making them real makes me happy." The plans for the new school were ambitious. Cole had hired an architect from Helena who designed a 2-story building with 6 separate classrooms, a proper library, a laboratory for scientific experiments, and living quarters for teachers who might come from distant places. The estimated cost made Evelyn's head spin, but Cole remained undaunted. "My father always said money was a tool, not a goal," he explained when she protested the expense. "What good is wealth if we don't use it to create something meaningful? This school will serve children for generations, Evelyn. Long after we're gone, students will learn in these rooms, discover new ideas, develop skills that change their lives. That's a legacy worth any price." Construction began in early March as soon as the ground thawed enough to dig foundations. Cole hired the best builders he could find, paying fair wages that attracted skilled craftsmen from throughout the territory. Evelyn visited the site whenever she could, watching with wonder as her vision took physical form. Walls rising from bare earth windows fitted into frames, the skeleton of something remarkable emerging from collective effort, but their happiness was shadowed by an ongoing concern. Reeves had not been found. The outlaw had vanished into the wilderness after the failed raid, and though sheriffs throughout the territory had been alerted, there had been no confirmed sightings. Some people believed he'd died in the mountains. Others thought he'd fled to Canada or California. But a few, including Sheriff Dawson, believed he was still out there waiting and planning. "I don't want you traveling alone," Cole said one morning in April, as Evelyn prepared to ride to Silver Ridge. "Not until we know for certain what happened to Reeves." "Cole, I can't live in fear," Evelyn protested, though she understood his concern. "I have students depending on me, responsibilities that require my presence." "Then I'll escort you. Or Sam will. Or one of the other men." His jaw was set in that stubborn line she'd learned to recognize. "I'm not being controlling, Evelyn. I'm being practical. Reeves saw you that day on the trail. He knows who you are. And men like that have long memories." She wanted to argue to insist on her independence, but she'd learned that accepting reasonable protection wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. "All right, but I don't want you neglecting the ranch to play bodyguard. The ranch will survive. You're more important." The compromise they reached was simple but effective. Most days Sam or one of the other ranch hands would escort Evelyn to town in the morning and collect her in the afternoon. On days when Cole had business in Silver Ridge, he accompanied her himself. It was inconvenient, certainly, but it also gave her time to know his men better, to understand the community he'd built at the Double B. "The boss talks about you all the time," Sam confided one morning as they rode toward town. "Before you came, he was all business, cattle land, profits planning. Good at it, mind you, but there wasn't much joy in him. Now he's got purpose beyond just the ranch. You've given him that." "He's given me something too," Evelyn replied. "He's shown me that I don't have to choose between independence and partnership, that the right person enhances your life rather than limiting it." "That's what good marriages look like," Sam agreed. "My Rosa and me, we've had our share of hard times, but we always figured things out together, and that made the hard times bearable and the good times even better." By May, the new school building had taken recognizable shape. Evelyn brought her students to see it one warm afternoon, watching their faces light up with excitement as they explored the spacious classrooms, the library that would soon hold hundreds of books, the laboratory with its special ventilation for chemical experiments. "Is this really for us?" Emma Patterson asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's for you, and for every child in this territory who wants to learn," Evelyn confirmed. "And not just children, we'll have evening programs for adults too. Education for anyone who seeks it regardless of age or background." Jack Morrison, now 16 and preparing to help his father with their ranch, ran his hand along one of the desks being installed. "My pa still says education is mostly useless, but I've been thinking the contracts he signs, the ledgers, he keeps the breeding records for our cattle, all of that requires reading and mathematics. Maybe education isn't as useless as he thinks." "Maybe you could explain that to him," Evelyn suggested gently. "Help him see that education isn't about abandoning practical work. It's about doing that work better, more efficiently, with more opportunities." "Maybe I will," Jack said, and there was new confidence in his voice that made Evelyn's heart swell with pride. The breakthrough came in June, unexpected and violent. Evelyn was working late at the schoolhouse, preparing final examinations for her students before summer break. Cole had stayed in town for a Cattlemen's Association meeting and planned to collect her when it ended. The evening was warm and pleasant, with long golden light streaming through the windows. She didn't hear
This
the door
story
open
was
behind
posted
her.
on the channel west
"Hello,
of
school
Betrayal.
teacher."
Please do not
Evelyn's blood
repost it
turned to
in any
ice.
form.
She knew that voice, cultured, cruel, unmistakable. She turned slowly to see Reeves standing in the doorway, his scarred face harder and meaner than she remembered. He looked gaunt, his clothes dirty and torn, his eyes feverish with something that might have been madness or desperation, or both. "I've been thinking about you," Reeves continued, moving into the room with predatory grace. "Thinking about how you talked me out of raiding this town, how you made me look weak in front of my men. Do you know what happened after that?" Evelyn's hand moved toward her desk drawer where she kept her revolver, but Reeves was faster. His own gun appeared aimed directly at her chest. "I wouldn't," he said softly. Keep your hands where I can see them. She obeyed, her mind racing. Cole was blocks away in a meeting. The town was quiet, most people at home for dinner. Screaming might bring help, but it would also trigger Reeves to shoot. She needed to stay calm, keep him talking, wait for an opportunity. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Justice, revenge, satisfaction." Reeves laughed, but there was no humor in it. "After you talked me out of raiding Silver Ridge, my men lost confidence in me, started questioning my decisions. 2 of them challenged my leadership, and I had to kill them to maintain control. Then the posse came, killed 3 more, and suddenly I was alone in the mountains with winter coming and nothing but hatred keeping me warm." "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, though sympathy was the last thing she felt. "No, you're not. You're terrified, which is appropriate. But you're also calculating, trying to figure out how to escape or delay until help arrives." He moved closer, his gun never wavering. "You're smart school teacher, too smart for your own good. That's what makes this interesting." "If you hurt me, they'll hunt you down," Evelyn warned. "Cole Barrington won't rest until Cole Barrington." Reeves interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "The great rancher who thinks he's better than everyone else. I know all about him, about how he married the school teacher, about the big new school you're building together. Very touching, very noble." His expression hardened. "And completely pointless because you're not going to live to see it finished." Evelyn's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe, but she forced herself to meet his gaze directly. "Killing me won't change anything. It won't bring back your men or restore your reputation. It'll just make you a murderer and ensure you spend the rest of your life running." "I'm already running," Reeves said flatly. "Have been for months. At least this way I'll have the satisfaction of hurting the people who destroyed everything I built." He raised the gun, aiming carefully, and Evelyn saw her death in his eyes. She thought of Cole, of the life they were building, of students she'd never teach, and children she'd never have. She thought about how unfair it was to have found such happiness, only to have it stolen away by a bitter, broken man who couldn't accept defeat. The gunshot that echoed through the schoolhouse was deafening. But it wasn't Reeves who fired. Sheriff Dawson stood in the doorway, his own gun smoking, his face grim. Reeves staggered backward, surprise and pain flashing across his scarred face before he collapsed onto the schoolroom floor, his weapon clattering across the wooden boards. "Are you hurt, Mrs. Barrington?" Dawson asked, rushing forward while keeping his gun trained on the fallen outlaw. "No." Evelyn managed, her voice shaking. "No, I'm fine. How did you—" "Cole got worried when his meeting ran long and you didn't come find him. Asked me to check on you." Dawson knelt beside Reeves, checking for a pulse. "He's alive, but he won't be causing trouble anymore. I've been tracking him for weeks, following reports of someone stealing food from isolated cabins. Figured he'd eventually come back for you. You were unfinished business in his mind." Cole burst through the door, seconds later, his face white with fear. "Evelyn, I heard the gunshot." He took in the scene, saw Reeves on the floor, and Evelyn standing unharmed, and the terror in his expression transformed into overwhelming relief. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered fiercely into her hair. "When I heard that shot, I thought, I'm fine," Evelyn assured him, though she was shaking violently now that the immediate danger had passed. "The sheriff saved me. Reeves was going to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I know." Cole pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands gentle as he checked for injuries. "I know what he was going to do, and the thought of it—" His voice broke. "I can't lose you, Evelyn. I can't." "You didn't. I'm here. I'm safe." More townspeople arrived, drawn by the gunshot and the commotion. Dr. Morrison came to tend to Reeves's wound, serious but not fatal, the bullet having caught him in the shoulder. The outlaw would survive to stand trial, to face justice for his crimes. Sheriff Dawson organized transportation to the territorial prison, where Reeves would await prosecution. As the outlaw was carried away on a stretcher, still unconscious, he looked almost pathetic, a broken man whose choices had led to ruin. Evelyn felt no triumph, only a sad recognition that violence and hatred ultimately consumed those who embraced them. "It's over," Cole said quietly, watching Reeves disappear into the night. "He can't hurt you anymore. Can't hurt anyone." "Yes," Evelyn agreed. It's over. But it took days for her to truly believe it, for the fear to fully recede. She had nightmares about Reeves's scarred face and cold eyes, waking in the darkness with her heart racing. Cole held her through those nights, talking softly about their plans and dreams until she could breathe normally again, until the terror subsided into mere memory. I should have been there, he said one night after a particularly bad dream left her trembling. I should have protected you. You can't be everywhere all the time, Evelyn replied, her head against his chest. And Sheriff Dawson was there when it mattered. Cole, we can't live our lives in fear of what might happen. Reeves is caught. He'll be imprisoned for years, possibly executed for his crimes. We're safe now. I know, but the thought of what could have happened... Don't. She touched his face gently. Don't dwell on possibilities that didn't occur. I'm here. I'm safe. We have a life to build together. Remember? He kissed her, then tender and fierce. At once, a kiss that spoke of fear transformed into gratitude of love, deepened by the recognition of how fragile and precious it was. Summer brought healing and progress. The new school building was completed by August, standing proud in the valley between Cole's Ranch and Silver Ridge, a perfect compromise that served both communities while symbolizing their partnership. The grand opening attracted people from throughout the territory, curious to see what the rancher and his schoolteacher wife had built. Evelyn stood beside Cole on the steps of the new building, looking out at the crowd gathered for the ceremony. There were her students, of course, fidgeting with excitement in their good clothes. There were their parents, some skeptical, but many genuinely enthusiastic. There were ranchers and shopkeepers, miners and farmers, the diverse collection of people who'd chosen to build lives in Montana territory. Friends and neighbors, Evelyn began, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. This building represents more than just classrooms and books. It represents possibility. The possibility that every child, regardless of background or circumstance, can access the education they need to build the future they dream of. The possibility that learning doesn't end with childhood but continues throughout our lives. The possibility that we can create something here in the wilderness that rivals the finest institutions back east. She gestured to Cole, who stepped forward to join her. My wife has a vision, he said, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. A vision of education that transforms not just individual lives, but entire communities. This school is the first step in making that vision real. We're hiring 3 additional teachers to join Mrs. Barrington, expanding our curriculum to include advanced mathematics, sciences, literature, and practical skills. We're opening our library to the entire community, over 2,000 volumes, with more being added monthly. And we're committing to this long-term investing in education as the foundation for everything else we hope to build. The applause was thunderous. Mrs. Patterson was crying openly. Sam and Rosa beamed with pride. Even some of the skeptical ranchers looked impressed by what they were seeing. After the ceremony, as people toured the new building and exclaimed over its features, Cole pulled Evelyn aside to a quiet corner of the library. Are you happy? He asked, studying her face. Profoundly, Evelyn replied. This is beyond anything I imagined when I left Boston. I thought I'd be teaching in a one-room schoolhouse, struggling against indifference and resistance. Instead, I have this... She gestured to the beautiful space around them. And I have you. Yes, Cole, I'm happy. Good. He kissed her forehead. Because I have news that might make you even happier. What news? You're going to be a mother. Evelyn's breath caught. What? How do you... Maria noticed certain signs. She's been a midwife for 20 years, and she says she's certain.
West of Betrayal.
The smile was incandescent.
Please do not repost it.
We're going to
in
have
any
a baby,
form.
Evelyn, sometime in early spring if Maria's calculations are correct. Joy and terror warred in Evelyn's chest. A baby. A child who would be part of both of them, who would grow up in this wild, beautiful territory. I can't stop teaching, she said immediately. Not completely. The school will be fine, Cole interrupted gently. You've hired good teachers. You can supervise and guide without being in the classroom every day. Evelyn, you don't have to choose between being a mother and being an educator. You can be both. Like your mother was, Evelyn said slowly, understanding dawning. Exactly like my mother was. She taught until the day I was born, then brought me to her classroom once I was old enough. I grew up surrounded by books and learning, and it shaped everything I became. He touched her face tenderly. Our child will have that same advantage parents who value education, who model curiosity and growth, who show that learning is a lifelong journey. Their first child, a daughter, they named Catherine Rose, after both their mothers arrived on a snowy morning in March. The birth was difficult, 12 hours of labor that left Evelyn exhausted and Cole terrified, but when Dr. Morrison finally placed the squalling infant in Evelyn's arms, every moment of pain dissolved into wonder. "She's perfect," Evelyn whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the miniature perfection of this new person they'd created. "She looks like you," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. Same dark hair, same determined expression. She's going to be formidable. Catherine Rose Barrington proved her father right from the beginning. Even as an infant, she was curious and demanding, crying when bored rather than hungry, reaching for books before toys, watching the world with alert intelligence. By her first birthday, she was walking. By 2, she was speaking in complete sentences. By 3, she was sitting in on lessons at the school, absorbing information with frightening ease. "She's going to be brilliant," Evelyn told Cole one evening as they watched their daughter carefully turning pages in a picture book, studying each illustration with intense focus. "She gets that from you," Cole replied, "and from your mother. And from both of you, you're not exactly unintelligent yourself." Their second child, a son they named Samuel James after Cole's father, and Sheriff Dawson, who'd retired and become a beloved fixture in their expanding community, arrived 2 years after Catherine. He was quieter than his sister, more contemplative, preferring to observe before acting. But he had his father's steady competence and his mother's love of learning. The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new changes and challenges. The school flourished, expanding its programs and reputation until families were moving to the area specifically for the educational opportunities. Evelyn supervised and taught part-time, balancing motherhood with her professional calling in a way that felt natural and right. Cole's ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful and respected operations in Montana Territory, known for both its quality cattle and its progressive treatment of workers. Their third child, another daughter named Margaret Helen, arrived when Catherine was 7 and Samuel was 5. She was the adventurous one, always exploring, always testing boundaries, equally comfortable in the barn with horses as in the library with books. 3 children. Evelyn marveled one evening as Cole helped her tuck them all into bed, a nightly ritual they shared whenever possible. "I never imagined having 3 children. Do you regret it?" Cole asked, though his smile suggested he knew the answer. "Not for a moment. They exhaust me and challenge me and force me to grow in ways I never expected. But they also fill my life with joy I didn't know was possible." She leaned against him as they stood in the doorway watching their children sleep. "We've built something remarkable, haven't we? Not just the school or the ranch, but this family, this life." "We have," Cole agreed. "And we're not done yet." The school continued to expand over the following years. By the time Catherine was 10, it had evolved into something approaching a small college, with courses in advanced sciences, classical languages, philosophy, and practical skills like engineering and agriculture. Students came from throughout the territory and beyond, drawn by the school's reputation for excellence and innovation. Evelyn's educational philosophy that learning should be accessible to all, should combine intellectual rigor with practical application, and should continue throughout life became the model for other institutions. Educators visited from as far as San Francisco and Chicago, studying their methods and trying to replicate their success. "You've changed education in this territory." Dr. Morrison told her one day when he stopped by to examine young Margaret after a riding accident, minor bruises, nothing serious. "Schools from Helena to Billings are using your curriculum, your teaching methods. You've influenced an entire generation." "We've influenced them," Evelyn corrected. "Cole and I together, none of this would exist without his support and investment." "True partnership," Morrison agreed. "It's a beautiful thing to witness." Montana Territory became a state when Catherine was 12, Samuel was 10, and Margaret was 5. The celebration in Silver Ridge was enormous, with flags and speeches and a sense that they were all part of something historic. Cole was asked to speak at the ceremony representing the ranching community that had built so much of the state's prosperity. We stand today on the work of countless pioneers, he told the assembled crowd, Evelyn standing beside him with their children. People who came west with nothing but determination and dreams, who built homes and communities and lives in harsh conditions. My parents were among them. My wife was one of them. And our children represent the future educated, capable, ready to build on the foundation we've laid. That night, after the celebrations had ended and the children were finally asleep, Evelyn and Cole sat on the porch of their home watching stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Evelyn asked, "when my stagecoach broke down and you appeared like something out of a story?" "All the time," Cole admitted. "I think about how close I came to not riding that direction. How if I'd been 5 minutes later or earlier, we might never have met. How much of what we've built together depended on that one moment of chance." "I don't think it was chance," Evelyn said thoughtfully. "Or if it was the kind of chance that feels like destiny. We were meant to find each other, Cole. Meant to build this life together." "Do you ever regret leaving Boston? The life you could have had there?" Evelyn turned to look at him. This man who'd become the center of her world without diminishing any part of who she was. "Never. Not once. Boston was where I came from, but Montana is where I belong. With you, with our children, with the work we're doing together. This is home." The years continued their steady march. Catherine grew into a brilliant young woman, excelling in mathematics and sciences, determined to attend university back east and become a physician, a goal her parents supported completely, despite the unconventionality of it. Samuel developed a passion for law and justice, inspired by stories of Sheriff Dawson's career and by his own keen sense of right and wrong. Margaret remained the adventurer, equally interested in veterinary medicine and wilderness exploration. "They're going to leave us," Cole said one evening when Catherine was 17 and preparing for her journey to a women's medical college in Philadelphia. "All three of them will eventually leave to pursue their own dreams." "That's what we raised them to do," Evelyn replied, though her heart ached at the thought. "We gave them education and confidence and the belief that they could achieve anything. Of course they'll leave, but they'll also carry us with them our values, our love, the foundation we built." "You're wiser than I am," Cole said, pulling her close. "I'm just more practiced at letting go. I've been preparing for this since they were born." The morning Catherine departed for Philadelphia, the entire family gathered to see her off. She looked so young and so determined, her trunk packed with books and medical supplies, her face alight with excitement and nervousness. "Make us proud," Cole told her, his voice thick with emotion. "I will, Papa, I promise." She hugged him tightly, then turned to Evelyn. "Thank you, Mama, for showing me that women can be anything they're brave enough to become." "You've always had that bravery," Evelyn replied, tears streaming down her face. "I just helped you recognize it. Now go change the world." Watching the stagecoach carry her daughter away, Evelyn felt the bittersweet weight of parenthood, the pride in who your children become, mixed with the grief of their necessary departure. Cole's arm around her shoulders was the only thing keeping her anchored. "She'll be fine," he murmured. "She's strong and smart and determined, just like her mother." "I know, but knowing doesn't make letting go any easier." The years after Catherine's departure were strange and beautiful. Samuel left for law school 2 years later, and Margaret eventually went to study veterinary science in Denver. The house felt empty without their children's energy and noise, but it also gave Evelyn and Cole space to rediscover each other, not just as parents, but as partners and lovers.
This story was
They
posted on the
traveled
channel
together for the
west
first
of the
time,
trail.
visiting
Please do
Catherine
not
in
repost
Philadelphia,
it in any
touring
form.
universities and medical facilities, attending lectures and cultural events. They saw Samuel argue his first case and Margaret assist with her first surgery on a horse. They took trips to San Francisco and New York, experiencing the world beyond Montana while always being eager to return home. And they continued their work. The school evolved into a full college offering degrees in multiple disciplines. Cole's Ranch became a model of sustainable agriculture and humane animal treatment. Together, they established scholarship funds that allowed talented students from poor families to pursue education regardless of financial circumstances. "We've been married 15 years, Cole said one morning as they sat on their porch watching the sun rise over the mountains. The autumn air was crisp and clean, reminding Evelyn of that first autumn they'd known each other. 15 years since I knelt in the snow and asked you to be my wife. Best decision I ever made, Evelyn replied, taking his hand, saying yes to you. I was thinking about something earlier, Cole continued, about what I said to you that day when you told me you weren't like other women. Evelyn smiled, remembering. You said that's why you wanted me. I did. And Evelyn... He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes still sharp and clear despite the silver threading through his dark hair, filled with the same intensity she'd seen 15 years ago. I meant it then, and I mean it even more now. You weren't like other women. You were braver, smarter, more determined to make a difference. You refused to accept the limitations society tried to impose on you. You came west alone to build a life on your own terms. And then I married you, Evelyn teased gently, which some might say compromised that independence. No, Cole shook his head firmly. You married me because you chose to, because you wanted to build something together that was bigger than what either of us could achieve alone. You didn't compromise your independence, you exercised it by choosing partnership with someone who respected everything you are. He stood and pulled her up with him, holding her close as they looked out over the valley they'd transformed together. The college building stood proud in the morning light. The ranch spread out below them, prosperous and well-managed. Smoke rose from chimneys in Silver Ridge, visible in the distance, where families were waking to another day in the community they'd helped build. You weren't like other women then, Cole said softly, repeating his words from so long ago. That's why I wanted you, and you still aren't like anyone else I've ever known. That's why I'll want you for the rest of my life. For however many years were given, I'll wake up grateful that you pointed a gun at me on a dusty road and gave me the chance to know you. Evelyn felt tears slide down her cheeks. Happy tears. Grateful tears. Tears for the life they'd built and the love that had only deepened with time and challenge. I love you, she whispered. More now than I did on our wedding day, which I wouldn't have thought possible. You've been everything I didn't know I needed, partner supporter, friend, lover father to our children, believer in my dreams. And you've been my everything, Cole replied. My compass. When I was lost, my strength when I was weak, my inspiration to be better than I thought I could be. He kissed her, then there on the porch of the home they'd built together, with the Montana sunrise painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. It was a kiss that contained 15 years of partnership, of shared triumphs and weathered storms of passion that had only grown richer with time. It was a kiss that promised more
This
years
story
ahead,
was posted
whatever
on the channel
challenges
west
they might
of
bring,
Betrayal.
whatever joys
Please do not
awaited.
repost it in
When
any
they finally
form.
broke apart, both were crying openly, but they were also smiling that particular smile that comes from deep contentment, from knowing you're exactly where you belong with exactly the right person. Come on, Evelyn said, taking his hand. Let's ride out to the college. I want to check on the new science building before classes start. After 15 years, you still can't sit still, what? Cole observed, but he was laughing. Neither can you. That's why we work so well together. They rode out as the sun climbed higher. Two people who'd found each other against unlikely odds and built something remarkable together. Behind them, their home stood solid and welcoming. Around them, the evidence of their shared vision, education, transforming lives, community flourishing possibility, expanding. Ahead, whatever years remained to be filled with continued work and love and the satisfaction of a life well lived. Evelyn Hart Barrington had come west seeking independence and purpose. She'd found both, but she'd also found something infinitely richer, a partnership that honored her strength while doubling her capacity for impact. She'd proven that a woman could be brilliant and educated and ambitious while also being a wife and mother. She'd shown that the right kind of love didn't limit possibility, but expanded it beyond imagination. And Cole Barrington, the rancher who'd appeared like something from a story on a dusty road, had found in her everything his heart had been searching for without knowing it existed. Together, they'd created a legacy that would outlast them both, not just in the buildings and institutions they'd built, but in the lives they'd touched and the minds they'd opened, and the belief they'd instilled that education and opportunity should belong to everyone. As they rode through the valley where their college stood, where students from across the region came to learn and grow, where the dreams of two people had become reality through love and partnership and unwavering commitment. Evelyn felt complete peace. This was the life she'd been meant to live. This was the man she'd been meant to love. This was the work she'd been meant to do. The Montana sky stretched endlessly above them, blue and clear and full of promise. The land they'd helped shape spread out in every direction, beautiful and harsh and home. And beside her rode the man who'd seen her truly from the very beginning, who'd loved her not despite her unconventional dreams, but because of them, who'd spent 15 years proving that real partnership multiplied rather than divided strength. "Happy anniversary, shit," Cole said, his voice carrying across the space between their horses. "Happy anniversary, Chow," Evelyn replied, her heart full to overflowing. "Here's to many more years together." "To many more," he agreed, "building, learning, loving, growing old together in this place we've made ours." They continued riding toward the college, toward their work, toward whatever the future held, together as they'd been from that first surprising meeting. Two people who'd found each other recognized what they'd found and had the courage to build something extraordinary from it. The story of Evelyn and Cole Barrington became legend in Montana. The Eastern schoolteacher and the Western rancher, who'd created one of the finest educational institutions in the territory, who'd raised remarkable children, who'd proven that partnership built on mutual respect and shared values could achieve the impossible. Parents told their children about them. Students studied in the buildings they'd built. And the values they'd championed, education for all dignity and work community over individual gain, shaped generations. But to Evelyn and Cole themselves, their story was simpler and more profound. It was about two people who'd been brave enough to recognize love when it appeared, wise enough to nurture it through challenges, and committed enough to build a life that honored both their individual dreams and their shared vision. It was about saying yes to possibility even when it meant risk. It was about believing that the right partnership could make everything else possible. As the sun climbed toward noon and they reached the college, students called out greetings to Mrs. Barrington and Mr. Barrington, their faces bright with the excitement of learning. Young women preparing to become teachers themselves, young men studying agriculture and engineering, children from ranches and towns, from wealthy families and poor ones, all gathered together in pursuit of education and possibility. This was their legacy. Not just buildings or programs or policies, but the fundamental belief that every person deserved the chance to become their best self, supported by education and community and opportunity. "We did good work," Cole said quietly as they dismounted and walked toward the main building. "We did," Evelyn agreed, "and we're not done yet." "Not even close," he confirmed, pulling her in for one more kiss there in the sunshine, with students streaming past and the mountains watching over them all. And in that kiss, in that moment in the life they'd built together, from dust and determination and love, Evelyn Hart Barrington knew she'd found something more precious than anything she'd imagined when she left Boston all those years ago. She'd found partnership that enhanced rather than diminished love, that expanded rather than confined purpose, that was multiplied by being shared. She'd found home. She'd found meaning. She'd found everything. And it had all started with a broken stagecoach wheel, a gunshot, and a cowboy who'd looked at an independent Eastern woman and seen not someone to change, but someone to cherish exactly as she was. The end of their story was really just the continuation of everything they'd begun teaching, building, loving, growing, making the world better. One decision.
This story
one
was
student,
posted on
one
the
day at a
channel
time.
west of Betrayal.
Together, always
Please do not
together for all
repost
the
it
years
in
that
any
remained,
form.
and in the legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was by any measure a life completely and beautifully lived, and neither of them would have changed a single moment of it.